Marcus Rivera's worn work boots echo against marble, so expensive it looks like frozen water. He shouldn't be here. The security guards flanking him know it. Their hands hover near their belts, waiting for him to make a wrong move, to give them a reason to throw this dust-covered construction worker back onto the street where he belongs. But Marcus isn't looking at them. He can't, because every molecule of his attention is locked on the wall above the fireplace, where a portrait hangs in a frame that probably costs more than his annual salary. The woman in the painting is breathtaking. She's younger than he remembers, maybe 19 or 20, wearing an elegant emerald dress that catches light like water. Her dark hair cascades over bare shoulders. Her eyes hold that particular sadness he knows so well, the kind that lives deep in someone's soul and never quite leaves. The artist captured every detail with the kind of care that comes from genuine love, from someone who looked at this face and thought it deserved to be immortalized forever. And Marcus knows this face. He's kissed it 1,000 times. He's watched it sleep. He's seen it contorted in pain during childbirth and glowing with joy holding their daughter. This is Elena, his wife, the woman he married 7 years ago in a courthouse ceremony with no family on her side. The woman who works double shifts as a nurse so they can afford their cramped apartment. The woman who has no photographs from her childhood, no yearbook, no relatives at their wedding. His wife's face is hanging in a billionaire's private study like she's royalty, and Marcus had no idea this painting existed until 30 seconds ago. The sound of Italian leather shoes on marble announces Alexander Cross before Marcus sees him. The billionaire enters his study with the casual confidence of a man who's never been denied anything, silver hair perfectly styled, a suit that costs more than Marcus makes in 6 months. He's expecting to dismiss another desperate person seeking handouts. His expression says he's done this dance 100 times. But when his eyes land on Marcus's face, something shifts. Marcus's voice comes out cracked and raw. "Why is my wife's face hanging in your mansion?" It's not the question Alexander Cross expected. His confident expression falters. Something flashes across his features, recognition maybe, or fear, or guilt. Something that makes his perfect composure crack, just enough for Marcus to see the human being underneath all that wealth and power. Security moves forward immediately. 2 men in dark suits closing in to remove the threat, to erase this uncomfortable moment from their employer's day. But Alexander raises one hand, and they freeze mid-step like puppets whose strings have been cut. "Wait," Alexander says quietly, his voice carrying an authority that doesn't need volume. "Let him speak." Marcus's hands are trembling, so badly he almost drops his phone. His heart is pounding so loud he's sure everyone in this cavernous room can hear it, a drumbeat of confusion and rising panic. But he manages to pull up his photos, manages to turn the screen toward the stranger who has his wife's portrait hanging like she's someone important, someone treasured. The photo shows Elena from last week. She's wearing her nurse's scrubs, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, their 6-year-old daughter Sophia perched on her hip. Both of them are laughing at something Marcus said behind the camera. It's real. It's his life. It's everything that matters to him. Before we continue with what happens next, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back and listen. Tell me where in the world you are right now. Because this story is about to take you on a journey you won't believe, and I want to know who's coming along for the ride. Now, let's get back to Marcus, because what he's about to hear will change his life forever. "This is Elena Rivera," Marcus says, and his voice is stronger now, fueled by desperation and confusion. "My wife, the mother of my child. We've been married 7 years. 7 years of waking up next to her, of building a life together, of struggling to pay rent and celebrating when Sophia lost her first tooth. So I'm going to ask you again, and I need you to tell me the truth. Why does a billionaire I've never met have a painting of her in his private study? Why is my wife hanging on your wall like she's someone you loved?" Alexander Cross's face drains of color so fast Marcus thinks the man might collapse. His hand reaches out, gripping the edge of his massive mahogany desk like he needs it to stay upright. He stares at the phone in Marcus's hand, at the image of Elena smiling with her daughter, and when he finally speaks, it's barely a whisper. "Impossible. Just that. One word, but it carries the weight of 28 years of grief. Marcus's voice rises because he's scared now, truly scared in a way that makes his chest tight and his vision narrow. What did you do to her? What aren't you telling me? I've loved this woman for 7 years, and I don't even know if Elena Rivera is her real name, do I? So talk. Now. Before I call the police and ask them why a billionaire has a portrait of someone else's wife. Alexander Cross moves like a man in a dream, slow and uncertain. He sinks into his leather chair, and suddenly he looks decades older than he did 2 minutes ago. The powerful businessman dissolves, leaving behind something fragile and human and broken. I don't know your wife, Mr. Rivera, he says, and there's something in his voice that makes Marcus's skin crawl. But I know that face. God help me, I know it better than I know my own. He turns to look at the portrait with an expression Marcus has seen before in mirrors after his own father died. It's grief. Pure, unfiltered grief that time hasn't healed, only taught to hide. Because 28 years ago, Alexander continues, I lost someone who looked exactly like her. The room seems to tilt. Marcus's mind races through possibilities, through explanations that make sense. Maybe Elena had a relative she never mentioned. Maybe there's a family resemblance she didn't know about. Maybe this is all some cosmic coincidence that will turn out to be nothing. But deep down, in that place where truth lives before your mind catches up, Marcus knows this is something else entirely. Alexander's hands tremble as he opens a locked drawer in his desk. The movement is practiced, like he's done this 10,000 times in private moments when no one was watching. He pulls out a photograph, the edges worn soft from being held countless times over the years. The paper is yellowed with age, creased where it's been folded and unfolded, treasured and grieved over. He places it on the desk beside Marcus's phone, right next to the modern photo of Elena. Marcus leans forward, and his entire world stops. The resemblance isn't just similar. It's not they could be sisters, or wow, they look alike. It's identical. Same eyes, same shape of the face, same smile, same distinctive star-shaped birthmark on the left wrist that Marcus has kissed 100 times without thinking to ask where it came from. The photograph shows a teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17, wearing a school uniform. She's laughing at something off camera, her whole face lit up with joy. Written on the back in faded ink, Catherine, junior year. My beautiful girl. Marcus feels his reality cracking like ice under too much weight. Who was she? Alexander's voice breaks completely. She was my daughter, Catherine Elizabeth Cross. And according to every record, every investigation, every piece of evidence collected over 3 decades, she died in a fire that destroyed my home in 1997. They told me her body was too badly burned to identify properly, but the DNA matched. I buried an empty coffin because there wasn't enough left to bury. I've spent 28 years knowing my daughter was gone forever. The silence that follows is absolute. No music, no dramatic sound effects, just breathing. Just 2 men staring at photographs that shouldn't exist side by side. But if she's alive, Alexander whispers, and now there are tears running down his face, down the face of a man who probably hasn't cried in public since the day they told him his daughter was dead, then everything I've believed for 3 decades is a lie. Everything I've accepted, everything I've mourned, and someone made absolutely certain I would never find out. He looks up at Marcus with eyes that have seen too much loss, which means someone wanted my daughter dead badly enough to fake her death. And Mr. Rivera, if your wife is my Catherine, then whoever tried to kill her 28 years ago might not be finished. If you're already hooked and your heart is racing with questions, hit that subscribe button for Olivia the Storyteller right now. Because this story is just beginning, and what comes next will shatter everything you think you know. We're talking conspiracy, corruption, a decades-old murder plot, and a wife who's been living under a false identity for reasons Marcus is about to discover. But if you're the type who watches entire stories without subscribing, go ahead and drop in the comments why you refuse to support storytellers who spend hours crafting these narratives for you. I'll wait. Actually, I won't, because Marcus is about to discover a secret that will tear his entire world apart, and whether you subscribe or not, this story is happening. Either way, comment below right now. Tell me what you think. Is Elena really Catherine Cross? If she is, why did she fake her death? Who wanted a 17-year-old girl dead? And what happens when Marcus goes home tonight and looks his wife in the eyes and asks her who she really is? Chapter 2 is coming, and trust me, you're not ready for what Marcus finds when he starts digging into his wife's past. Marcus stands in that billionaire study holding 2 photographs that shouldn't match but do, and his mind is racing backward through 7 years of marriage, searching for clues he missed, for signs he ignored, for moments when the woman he loved might have slipped and revealed who she really was. So let me take you back to where this all began. Back to when Marcus Rivera was just a tired construction worker with dreams he'd buried and a heart he didn't know was about to be completely transformed. 7 years ago, Marcus was living the kind of life that grinds you down slowly, one 18-hour day at a time. He was working double shifts at construction sites all over the city, his hands permanently stained with concrete dust and motor oil, his body aching in ways that made him feel 40 instead of 26. He lived in a studio apartment, so small you could touch both walls if you stretched out your arms, the kind of place where the heater clanked all night and the neighbors' arguments bled through paper-thin walls. Every 2 weeks, he'd wire half his paycheck to his mother in Mexico, who was fighting cancer with medication she could barely afford and a stubbornness that ran in the family. Marcus had been accepted to a prestigious architecture program once. Full scholarship. His professors said he had real talent, that he could design buildings that would change skylines. But his father died suddenly, his mother got sick, and dreams don't pay medical bills. So he dropped out in his junior year, picked up a hammer, and learned to build other people's visions instead of his own. The night he met Elena, Marcus was on a maintenance shift at City General Hospital, fixing water damage in the 3rd-floor hallway that some burst pipe had caused. It was 2 a.m, that dead hour when the world feels empty and your exhaustion sits so heavy in your bones you can barely remember what it feels like to be rested. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects, casting that greenish glow that makes everyone look half dead. The air smelled like industrial cleaner trying to cover up the smell of sickness and fear that permeates every hospital. Marcus was on his knees replacing warped baseboards, his mind blank with fatigue, when he heard footsteps and looked up to see a woman in scrubs holding out a cup of coffee. She wasn't the kind of beautiful that stops traffic. She was the kind of beautiful that sneaks up on you, that grows the more you look, that lives in the kindness of her eyes and the softness of her smile. Her name tag said Elena, and she said, "You look like you could use this more than me." Most hospital staff ignored maintenance workers completely, looking through them like they were furniture, but Elena saw him. She asked if he wanted sugar. She asked how long his shift was. She asked if he was okay because he looked tired, and when he laughed and said he was always tired, something flickered in her eyes. A recognition, like she understood what it meant to be running on empty, to be surviving instead of living. They talked for 20 minutes during her break, sitting on the floor in that hallway with their backs against the wall like a couple of kids. Elena asked about his life and actually listened, her dark eyes focused on his face like his words mattered, like his story was worth hearing. He told her about his mother, about the architecture dreams he'd given up, about how some days he felt like he was drowning in responsibilities. And Elena, she just nodded. She said, "I know what it's like to start over with nothing. I know what it's like when the past is something you can't go back to." At the time, Marcus thought she was being poetic, empathetic. He didn't know she was being literal. When he asked about her family, her expression shuddered for just a second, something closing behind her eyes, and she said, "I don't have anyone. It's just me against the world." The way she said it made his chest ache. Here was this woman who looked barely old enough to be out of college, working night shifts alone, with a sadness in her eyes that seemed too old for her face. Marcus found himself wanting to protect her, to be the person she could lean on, even though they just met and he barely knew her name. 3 months of late-night conversations followed. Every time Marcus had a shift at the hospital, Elena would find him during her breaks. They'd talk about everything and nothing, books they'd read and places they wanted to visit, stupid jokes that made them laugh when they were too tired to think straight. Marcus fell in love slowly, and then all at once, the way you don't notice the sunrise until suddenly the sky is full of light. But even as he fell, there were things that didn't quite add up, questions she wouldn't answer, walls she kept carefully maintained. She never talked about her past. Whenever he'd ask about her childhood or her family, she'd deflect with a gentle smile and say, "I don't like looking backward. The past is done. I only care about now." She had no photographs from before she moved to the city 3 years earlier. No yearbook, no high school friends she kept in touch with, no relatives who called on holidays. When they filled out their marriage license at the courthouse, her section for emergency contacts was blank. Marcus noticed these things, cataloged them in the back of his mind, but he was so in love he convinced himself everyone has secrets, everyone has pain they don't want to share. He told himself she'd open up when she was ready, that love meant giving her space to heal from whatever wounds she carried. Looking back now, Marcus can see the red flags, so clearly they might as well have been neon signs. Elena flinched whenever someone took a photograph, would turn her face away, or step out of frame like she'd been trained to avoid cameras. She refused to go to the DMV with him, claimed she had errands to run but really just wouldn't enter government buildings if she could help it. She paid for everything in cash, even big purchases, pulling out envelopes of bills she said she'd saved from her nursing salary. When they got married in that courthouse ceremony, so simple and quick it felt surreal, there was no one on her side. Just her coworkers who barely knew her, witnesses to a wedding where the bride had no past and the groom loved her too much to demand one. Marcus's mother couldn't make the trip from Mexico, so it was just the two of them and strangers, promising forever in a fluorescent-lit room that smelled like floor polish. Elena cried when she said her vows, tears streaming down her face, and Marcus thought it was because she was happy. Now he wonders if she was crying because she was lying, because she was binding this good man to a woman who didn't even exist. They built a life together in that tiny apartment, and Elena was everything Marcus could have hoped for. She was hardworking, picking up extra shifts when money got tight, never complaining about the cramped space or the neighbors or the fact that they couldn't afford the things other couples had. She was loving, leaving notes in his lunch about how proud she was of him, rubbing his shoulders when he came home sore from work, making their small world feel abundant with her presence. When Sophia was born after 3 years of marriage, Elena held their daughter and cried so hard Marcus thought something was wrong. But she kept whispering, "She'll have what I never did. She'll have a real childhood. She'll know she's loved." Marcus thought she was talking about her own lonely upbringing, about being an orphan in a world without family. He didn't know she was talking about something else entirely, about a childhood stolen by fire and violence and secrets that killed. The oddities continued, small enough to overlook individually, but forming a pattern Marcus couldn't quite name. Elena never took Sophia to get professional photographs done, even though Marcus suggested it constantly. She said they were too expensive, that his phone pictures were good enough, but he noticed she always angled Sophia away from cameras at the park, at birthday parties, anywhere someone might post a photo online. She homeschooled Sophia starting at age 4, claiming she didn't trust public schools, that she wanted to control what their daughter learned. She had no social media accounts, said she didn't see the point, that social media was poison. She never contacted relatives because she claimed she had none, but sometimes Marcus would catch her staring at nothing with an expression so haunted he'd ask what was wrong, and she'd snap back to the present with a smile and say, "Nothing, just thinking." Once, when Sophia was 3, she drew a picture of a big house with columns and a fountain, and Elena went white as paper. Marcus asked where Sophia had seen a house like that, and Elena said quietly, "I don't know. Kids have wild imaginations." But her hands were shaking when she threw the drawing away. Everything unraveled 1 week before Marcus walked into Alexander Cross's mansion, though he didn't know it yet. Sophia got sick at school, a bad flu that had her running a fever of 103, and Marcus left work early to pick her up. Elena was at the hospital on shift, unreachable during an emergency surgery, and Marcus needed to find their insurance cards to take Sophia to urgent care. He knew Elena kept important documents in a lockbox under their bed, and she'd given him the combination years ago for emergencies. This was an emergency. His daughter was burning up and crying, and he needed those cards. So he opened the box, rifled through the papers, found the insurance information, and then he saw something that made his blood turn cold in his veins. Elena's birth certificate, official government document, embossed seal, everything that made it legitimate. Except it was issued 7 years ago. Not when she was born, but when she was supposedly already 24 years old. Just months before they met. Marcus stood there holding that document with Sophia whimpering in the next room, and his hands started shaking. He looked closer. The signature on the birth certificate was in the same ink as the signature on their marriage license in the same box. The same pen had been used for multiple official documents, which meant someone had filled them all out at the same time, creating a paper trail for a person who hadn't existed before. His wife's entire identity might be fabricated. Elena Rivera might not be real. He should have stopped there. Should have closed the box, taken Sophia to urgent care, waited for Elena to come home and asked her to explain. But his hands kept moving like they belonged to someone else, pulling out more documents, searching for something that made sense. And that's when he found the newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, folded so many times the creases were wearing through. The headline made his vision blur. Billionaire's daughter perishes in a state fire, body never recovered. The article was dated October 1997, 28 years ago. It detailed a tragic fire at the Cross estate that killed Victoria Cross and her 17-year-old daughter Catherine. There was an investigation into whether the fire was accidental or intentional. There were quotes from Alexander Cross, devastated father and widower, talking about his unbearable loss. And there was a photograph. The teenage girl in the photo had Elena's eyes. The same shape, the same distant sadness, even in a candid shot. She was wearing a school uniform, laughing at something off camera, and on her left wrist, visible even in the grainy newspaper photo, was a distinctive star-shaped birthmark that Marcus had kissed 1,000 times on his wife's skin. So Marcus's entire marriage might be built on a lie, and you're just going to keep watching without subscribing to Olivia the Storyteller? That's your choice, I guess. While you're deciding whether stories like this deserve your support, drop a comment explaining why you think Elena is hiding her identity. Is she in witness protection, running from something, or is there something even darker at play? Comment right now with your theory, because I want to know what you think happened to Catherine Cross and why a dead girl would fake her identity to marry a construction worker and live in poverty when she could have claimed a billionaire's fortune. What is Elena so afraid of that she'd rather live as no one than return to being someone? Let's find out what Marcus does next, because this is where things get really complicated. Marcus stands in his apartment holding that newspaper clipping with Sophia crying in the next room, and he's faced with a choice that will define everything that comes next. He could confront Elena right now, demand the truth, risk losing everything if she runs. Or he could investigate quietly, gather evidence, find out who his wife really is before she knows he's looking. And here's the thing about Marcus that you need to understand. He's a man who fixes things for a living. When something is broken, he doesn't panic. He doesn't guess. He measures twice, cuts once, and solves the problem methodically. So that's what he decides to do with his crumbling marriage. He's going to find the truth before he asks for it. But first, he has to take care of his daughter. Marcus folds the newspaper clipping carefully, puts everything back in the lockbox exactly as he found it, and takes Sophia to urgent care. He sits in that waiting room with her head on his lap, her small body burning with fever, and he keeps thinking about the woman he married. The woman who brought him coffee at 2 a.m. The woman who chose a life of struggle when she could have had everything. If Elena is really Catherine Cross, if she really did fake her death and walk away from billions of dollars, then she did it for a reason. People don't abandon that kind of wealth and power unless they're running from something worse than poverty. Unless they're terrified of something more dangerous than being nobody. Marcus looks down at Sophia's flushed face and feels something cold settle in his chest. If his wife has been hiding for 28 years, what happens when whoever she's hiding from finds out she's alive? What happens to his daughter if the past catches up? Elena comes home from her shift at 4 a.m. to find Marcus sitting in the dark living room, pretending to read on his phone. She kisses his forehead, asks how Sophia is, and he says fine, just the flu, nothing serious. He watches her move around their tiny apartment, exhausted from a 12-hour shift, still in her scrubs, and he searches her face for signs of deception. But she just looks like Elena. Tired, kind, real. She doesn't look like a woman carrying a secret that weighs as much as a dead identity. When she finally goes to bed, Marcus lies awake beside her, listening to her breathe, wondering if the woman he's holding is someone he's never really known at all. He doesn't sleep that night. He can't, because every time he closes his eyes, he sees that newspaper photo, that teenage girl with Elena's eyes, and he hears himself at their wedding saying I do to a person who might not exist. 3 days later, Marcus does something he never thought he'd do. He takes money from their savings account, money they've been setting aside for Sophia's 7th birthday party, and he hires a private investigator. Not one of those expensive agencies with offices and skyscrapers. Marcus can't afford that. He finds a guy named Jimmy Chen who works out of a strip mall office between a nail salon and a tax preparer, a former cop who got tired of bureaucracy and went private. Jimmy charges $200 a day plus expenses, which is $200 Marcus doesn't have, but he's past the point of caring about money. He needs to know. He needs evidence. So he sits in that cramped office that smells like instant coffee in desperation, and he tells Jimmy everything. The missing childhood photos, the birth certificate issued when Elena was already an adult, the newspaper clipping about a dead billionaire's daughter who looks exactly like his wife. Jimmy listens without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, and when Marcus finishes, Jimmy just nods like this is the most normal request he's heard all week. He says he'll start with the basics: credit history, employment records, educational background, anything that creates a paper trail. He tells Marcus to go home and act normal, that investigation takes time, that the worst thing Marcus can do is tip off Elena that he's looking into her past. Acting normal turns out to be the hardest thing Marcus has ever done. He goes to work every day, swinging a hammer and measuring angles, while his mind is somewhere else entirely. He comes home and plays with Sophia, helps her with her homework, reads her bedtime stories about princesses and dragons, and the whole time he's wondering if his daughter is actually the granddaughter of one of the wealthiest men in the country. He has dinner with Elena, asks about her day, laughs at her stories about difficult patients, and he's performing a role in a play where he doesn't know the script. She doesn't seem to notice anything is wrong. Or maybe she's just better at pretending than he is. Maybe she's been pretending for so long it's become second nature. Every night when she falls asleep, Marcus studies her face in the darkness, memorizing it, searching for Catherine Cross underneath Elena Rivera. He looks at that birthmark on her wrist, that star-shaped mark she's covered with foundation every single day for 7 years, and he wonders how he never questioned it. How many other lies is he living with? How much of their life together is real? Jimmy calls after 5 days with news that makes Marcus's stomach drop. Elena Rivera has no records before 7 years ago. Nothing. No credit history, no previous addresses, no school transcripts, no employment records before City General Hospital. It's like she materialized fully formed as a 24-year-old nurse. Her social security number flags in the system as issued for non-work purposes, which Jimmy explains is typically used for people in witness protection or foreign nationals who need documentation. Her nursing license is legitimate, but it was granted through an accelerated program that fast-tracks people with certain credentials, and those credentials trace back to a community college that has no record of Elena Rivera ever attending. Someone built this identity professionally. Someone with resources and connections and the ability to create an entire person out of nothing. Jimmy says he's seen this kind of work before, usually done by federal agencies or very expensive private firms that cater to people who need to disappear. This wasn't some amateur job. Whoever made Elena Rivera knew exactly what they were doing. Marcus thanks Jimmy and asks him to keep digging. Then he spends his lunch break at the public library, hunched over a microfilm machine like a detective in some old movie. He searches through newspaper archives from October 1997, reading every article he can find about the Cross estate fire. The coverage was extensive because the Crosses were society royalty, the kind of family that appeared in magazines and donated wings to hospitals. Victoria Cross was a philanthropist and patron of the arts. Catherine Cross was a private school student with a bright future ahead of her. Alexander Cross was a self-made billionaire who'd built an empire from nothing. And on October 15, 1997, their mansion burned to the ground in the middle of the night. The fire started in multiple locations, which suggested arson, but the official investigation concluded it was an electrical fire that spread rapidly through the old building. Victoria's body was found in the hallway outside Catherine's bedroom, like she'd been trying to reach her daughter. Catherine's body was found in what remained of her room, so badly burned that identification was difficult. DNA from her hairbrush confirmed it was her. Alexander survived because he was in the guest house that night, having argued with Catherine earlier that evening. But here's what catches Marcus's attention. Buried in the follow-up articles, there are mentions of inconsistencies. An anonymous tip to the fire marshal claiming Catherine started the fire herself, distraught over family problems. Accelerant traces found in patterns that suggested professional arson, not teenage rebellion. An insurance investigator who questioned whether the DNA evidence was reliable given the condition of the remains. And then, suddenly, the investigation was closed. Ruled accidental. No further questions. The articles mentioned that Alexander Cross declined to comment beyond his initial statement about his grief. There's a quote from him that Marcus reads 3 times. "My daughter was troubled, but she was not capable of this." Whoever is spreading rumors about Catherine is desecrating her memory. Marcus stares at those words, written by a father who believed his daughter was dead, and he thinks about the fact that same father has a portrait of her hanging in his study 28 years later. Alexander never let go. Some part of him never accepted it. That night, Marcus waits until Elena is asleep, then he carefully pulls their wedding photo album from the closet. He finds the best photo they have of Elena, a candid shot where she's laughing genuinely, her guard down, her face unfiltered by the careful neutrality she usually maintains. He takes that photo and the newspaper image of Catherine Cross to a 24-hour copy shop, and he uses their aging software to digitally age Catherine from 17 to 33. The result makes his hand start shaking so badly he has to set down the printout. It's a perfect match. Not similar. Not close. Perfect. The same structure to the cheekbones. The same distance between the eyes. The same shape to the smile. Elena is Catherine. His wife is a dead billionaire's daughter. And that means everything she's ever told him about herself is a lie. Marcus goes home and does something he knows is a violation of trust, but he's past the point of caring about ethics. He waits until 3 in the morning when Elena is in the deepest part of sleep, and he carefully lifts her left wrist into the dim light from their bathroom. The birthmark is there, exactly where it appears in the newspaper photo. Star-shaped, distinctive, impossible to fake. But there's something else he notices for the first time. The skin around the birthmark has a slightly different texture, like she's been applying something to it regularly. Scar cream, maybe, or heavy concealer that's built up over years. She's been hiding it, actively covering it up every single day, hoping no one would notice, hoping no one would ask questions. Marcus lowers her wrist gently, his heart pounding so loud he's sure she'll wake up, but Elena just sighs in her sleep and rolls over. He stands there in the darkness watching his wife, this stranger who chose him, who built a life with him, who gave him a daughter and 7 years of happiness. Why? That's what he can't understand. Why would Catherine Cross, heir to billions, choose to become Elena Rivera, working-class nurse married to a construction worker? The only person who might have answers is Alexander Cross himself. Marcus spends 2 days trying to figure out how to approach a billionaire, how to get past security and assistance, and all the layers of protection that surround someone that powerful. He tries calling Cross Industries directly and gets stuck in phone tree hell. He tries emailing through the corporate website and gets an auto-response. He even tries showing up at the corporate headquarters, but security won't let him pass the lobby without an appointment. Finally, Marcus does something desperate. He creates a fake identity online, poses as a representative from a charity organization, and books an appointment with Alexander Cross's assistant under the pretense of discussing a major donation opportunity. It works. They give him a time slot 3 days out. 3 days to figure out what he's going to say. 3 days to prepare for the moment when he looks a grieving father in the eye and tells him his daughter might be alive. But Marcus can't wait 3 days. The night before his scheduled appointment, he lies awake replaying everything he knows, everything he suspects, and he realizes something that makes his blood run cold. If Elena has been in hiding for 28 years, if she faked her death and ran, she must have had a reason. And that reason is probably still out there. Whoever wanted Catherine Cross dead might still want Elena Rivera dead, which means his daughter, his innocent 6-year-old daughter, might be in danger from something Marcus doesn't understand. So the next morning, Marcus doesn't go to work. He tells Elena he has a dentist appointment, and instead he gets on a bus to the part of town where billionaires live behind gates and walls. He finds the Cross estate, a massive modern mansion that was rebuilt after the fire, and he walks right up to the security gate. The guards stop him immediately, ask who he is, what he wants. Marcus doesn't have a plan. He doesn't have an appointment. All he has is a phone full of photos and a desperation that makes him reckless. He tells the guards he needs to see Alexander Cross immediately, that it's about his daughter, that he has information about Catherine. The guards look at each other like Marcus is crazy, like they've heard this before from conspiracy theorists and con artists. They tell him to leave. Marcus refuses. He's shouting now, demanding to be let in, causing enough of a scene that eventually someone higher up comes to deal with the situation. They bring him inside, probably to get him off the street before he becomes a public relations problem. They escort him through marble hallways and up sweeping staircases, and Marcus knows he's going to get arrested for this, probably sued for trespassing, but he doesn't care. He needs answers. And that's when he ends up in Alexander Cross's private study, flanked by security guards, staring at a portrait of his wife hanging above a fireplace like a memorial to the dead. That's where we started. But now you understand what brought him here. Desperation. Love. Fear for his daughter. The need to know who he's been sleeping beside for 7 years. Marcus stands there with his worn work boots on marble that costs more than his apartment, and he asks the question that will change everything. Why is my wife's face hanging in your mansion? But what Marcus doesn't know is that he's not the only person watching this confrontation unfold. 50 miles away, in a police station downtown, Detective Maria Santos sits in her office reviewing security footage from the Cross estate. She's been monitoring that property for 28 years, ever since she was a rookie cop assigned to the Cross estate fire investigation. She's the one who never believed the official ruling. She's the one who spent 3 decades quietly gathering evidence that the case was closed prematurely, that someone powerful didn't want questions asked. And now, watching this desperate man force his way into Alexander Cross's mansion demanding answers about Catherine, Maria Santos feels something she hasn't felt in years. Hope. And terror. Because if Catherine Cross is alive, if she's been in hiding all this time, then Maria's suspicions were right. Someone did try to kill that girl. Someone powerful enough to make it look like she died. Someone who might still be watching. Maria picks up her phone with hands that are steadier than they should be after so many years of waiting, and she makes a call. Her voice is calm when she speaks, professional, but underneath there's an urgency that comes from knowing this moment will either solve everything or destroy it. She says, "We have a situation. Someone's asking about the crossfire. After 28 years, someone finally connected the dots. I think our window is closing. I think whoever wanted Catherine dead is about to find out she's alive. And when that happens, everyone involved is going to be in danger." Marcus just risked everything for the truth, and you can't even hit the subscribe button for Olivia the Storyteller. Interesting priorities. While I wait for those of you with commitment issues to explain yourselves in the comments, let's get back to the story, because what Alexander is about to reveal will change Marcus's life forever, and not in the way he expects. Drop a comment right now telling me what you think happens next. Does Alexander believe Marcus? Does Elena find out he's been investigating her? And who exactly is Detective Santos calling? Who's been watching this family for 28 years? Comment your theories below, because we're about to find out that this conspiracy goes deeper than anyone imagined, and the people who wanted Catherine Cross dead have been waiting decades for her to resurface. Chapter 4 is coming, and trust me, you need to be subscribed for what happens next. Alexander Cross sits in his leather chair staring at Marcus's phone like it's showing him a ghost. And for him, that's exactly what it is. His hands are trembling as he holds the device, zooming in on the image of Elena in her nurse's scrubs with little Sophia on her hip, and you can see 28 years of grief crashing into 28 years of hope all at once on his face. When he finally speaks, his voice cracks in a way that tells you this man hasn't let himself hope for so long that he's forgotten what it feels like. He says, "I searched for 17 years before I accepted she was gone. 17 years of following every lead, every rumor, every supposed sighting of my daughter. Do you know what that does to a person? To spend nearly 2 decades chasing shadows because you can't accept that your child is dead?" Marcus stands there frozen, still processing the fact that his wife might be this man's daughter, and Alexander starts talking like a dam has broken, like he's been holding these words inside for decades and they're finally pouring out. He tells Marcus about the private investigators he hired, dozens of them over the years, the best in the world. Men who specialized in finding missing persons, who had connections with law enforcement and intelligence agencies, who could track anyone anywhere. Alexander paid them fortunes, followed every false lead from Los Angeles to London to Tokyo. There were sightings of girls who looked like Catherine, runaways with similar descriptions. Unidentified Jane, that made his heart stop until he could confirm they weren't her. Every birthday, every holiday, every anniversary of the fire, Alexander would get calls from con artists claiming to have information about Catherine, people who wanted money in exchange for lies. He paid some of them anyway, just in case, because what if one of them was telling the truth? What if ignoring that call meant losing his only chance to find his daughter? The body in the fire was never conclusively identified, Alexander explains, and his voice drops to barely above a whisper. There was too much damage. The fire burned so hot and so long that by the time the firefighters got it under control, Victoria and Catherine were barely recognizable as human. The forensics team had to use dental records for Victoria, and even those were difficult because of the heat damage. For Catherine, they used DNA from her hairbrush, samples of her hair that had been sitting on her dresser before the fire. The DNA matched. The lab said it was definitely her. So Alexander buried an empty coffin because there wasn't enough left of his daughter to put in it, and he tried to move forward because that's what everyone told him he had to do. Move forward. Accept it. Grieve and heal. But he never did. Some part of him always wondered. The DNA evidence felt too convenient, too clean for a fire that had destroyed everything else. Years later, after spending millions on investigators who found nothing, Alexander learned something that made him sick. DNA from a hairbrush can be planted. If someone wanted to make it look like Catherine died in that fire, all they'd need is her hair, which would have been easy to obtain. They could have pulled it from her brush days or weeks before, kept it, and then placed it at the scene or substituted it for the real samples. Alexander brought this to the investigators who'd closed the case, demanded they reopen it, but by then it was 2008, 11 years after the fire, and everyone told him he was grasping at straws, that grief was making him see conspiracies where there were none. He gave up in 2014, 17 years after losing his family. That's when he commissioned the portrait that Marcus is staring at now. Alexander found the best artist in the country, gave him dozens of photographs of Catherine, and asked him to paint her as she would have been at 19, right before everything ended. The portrait was his memorial, his way of keeping her alive when every logical part of his brain knew she was gone. He talks to it sometimes, Alexander admits, and there's no shame in his voice, just raw honesty. Late at night when the house is empty, he'll stand in front of that painting and tell Catherine about his day, about the world she's missing, about how sorry he is that he failed to protect her. Marcus feels something twist in his chest because he understands that kind of love, that desperate need to hold on to someone even after they're gone. That's how Marcus feels about his father, about his mother back in Mexico fighting cancer. We don't let go of the people we love, even when letting go would hurt less. Now Alexander needs to explain the night of the fire, and you can see how much this costs him, how much shame he's carried for 28 years. He tells Marcus that Catherine was a rebellious teenager, angry at the world in the way that privileged kids sometimes are when they don't yet understand how good they have it. She resented the wealth, called it blood money, accused Alexander of caring more about building his empire than about his family. And the horrible truth was that she wasn't entirely wrong. Alexander had been consumed by his business in those years, traveling constantly, missing recitals and parent-teacher conferences, being physically present but emotionally absent. Catherine wanted to go to art school. She was talented, really talented, could paint and draw in ways that made you feel something deep in your chest. But Alexander wanted her at Harvard studying business or law, something practical that would prepare her to take over the company someday. He thought he was securing her future. She thought he was suffocating her dreams. The night of the fire, they had a massive argument. Catherine was 17, about to turn 18, and she'd been accepted to the Rhode Island School of Design. Full scholarship based on her portfolio. She was so proud, so excited, and Alexander told her absolutely not. He said art school was a waste of her potential, that she could paint as a hobby, but she needed a real education, a real career. The fight escalated. Catherine screamed that she hated him, that she wished she'd been born into any other family, that money had ruined everything good in their lives. Victoria tried to mediate, tried to calm them both down, but Alexander was stubborn and Catherine was furious. She stormed out of the house around 10 at night, and Alexander assumed she'd gone to a friend's house to cool off. He went to the guest house, where he'd been sleeping for the past 3 weeks, ever since Victoria found out about the affair. Marcus watches Alexander's face as he says this, and you can see the guilt that's been eating him alive for nearly 3 decades. Alexander was having an affair with someone from work, and Victoria knew, and Catherine knew, and that's what the argument was really about. Catherine had confronted him earlier that day, told him he was destroying their family, that her mother was crying herself to sleep every night. She asked how he could do this to them, how he could be so selfish. And Alexander, instead of apologizing, instead of taking responsibility, got defensive and attacked her dreams. He turned their conversation about his failures into a lecture about her future. That was the last real conversation they ever had. At 3 a.m, the fire alarm woke Alexander in the guest house. He ran toward the main mansion and saw flames pouring out of the upper windows, black smoke billowing into the night sky. He called 911, grabbed a garden hose knowing it was useless but not knowing what else to do. He could hear screaming from inside the house, Victoria's voice calling for Catherine, and he tried to go in but the heat pushed him back. The firefighters arrived within 10 minutes, but by then the fire had consumed the second floor where the bedrooms were. They found Victoria's body in the hallway outside Catherine's room, like she'd been trying to reach her daughter when the smoke overcame her. They found what they believed was Catherine's body in her bedroom, though the damage was so severe it was barely identifiable as human. The official report said the fire had started in multiple locations on the second floor, which suggested accelerant, but the investigators couldn't determine how it had been set. There was talk of Catherine doing it herself, some anonymous tip that came in claiming she threatened to burn the house down during the argument with her father, but Alexander knew that was a lie. Catherine loved her mother. Whatever anger she had toward Alexander, she would never have done something that would hurt Victoria. The investigation's official conclusion was accidental electrical fire, which made no sense given the evidence. Fire marshals found accelerant traces in multiple locations, patterns that suggested someone had deliberately spread something flammable throughout the second floor. The pattern was too sophisticated to be a teenage girl acting impulsively. It looked professional, methodical, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. But then, suddenly, the investigation was shut down. The lead investigator was transferred to another department. The fire marshal's report was amended to remove the sections about accelerant patterns. The official ruling became accidental electrical fire caused by old wiring in a historic home. Case closed, no further questions. Alexander tried to fight it, hired his own experts who confirmed the original findings, but by then the official narrative was set. No one wanted to reopen the case. No one wanted to question the findings. And Alexander, drowning in grief and guilt, eventually stopped pushing because part of him wondered if maybe, just maybe, the official story was easier to live with than the alternative. Now comes the part that Alexander has never told anyone, the shame he's carried alone for almost 3 decades. He looks at Marcus with eyes that have seen too much pain, and he confesses something that makes Marcus's blood run cold. Victoria died because he was having an affair. That's what Alexander believes, what he's believed for 28 years. Catherine knew about the affair because she'd caught Alexander with his mistress weeks earlier. That's why she was so angry that night, why the argument escalated beyond the usual parent-teenager conflict. She told him he was destroying their family, and she was right. But what Alexander didn't know until years later, what he discovered when he started his own investigation into the fire, was that his business partner at the time had criminal connections. Richard Hendricks, the man Alexander had brought in to help expand the company, the man he trusted with financial decisions and corporate strategy, had ties to organized crime. Money laundering, extortion, connections to people who could make problems disappear. And Hendricks had wanted to buy Alexander out of the company. He'd made an offer 6 months before the fire, a generous offer that would have made Alexander extremely wealthy while giving Hendricks complete control. Alexander refused. He'd built the company from nothing, and he wasn't ready to walk away. 2 weeks after the fire, after Victoria and Catherine were dead and Alexander was barely functional with grief, Hendricks withdrew his buyout offer completely. Just dropped it like it had never been discussed. At the time, Alexander thought it was out of respect for his loss, a gentleman's agreement to table business discussions during tragedy. But years later, When Alexander started investigating Hendrix's background, he realized something chilling. The fire happened right when Alexander needed it least, and right when Hendrix needed it most. Alexander was about to discover financial irregularities in the company books. Victoria had noticed something off in their personal accounts and had started asking questions. She'd mentioned to Alexander days before she died that she thought Hendrix was stealing from them, that the numbers didn't add up, that she wanted to hire an independent auditor. Alexander dismissed her concerns, told her she didn't understand business finance, said Hendrix was trustworthy. And then Victoria died before she could prove what she suspected. Alexander spent years wondering if the fire was meant for him, if someone wanted him dead to keep him from discovering the embezzlement. But the fire killed Victoria and Catherine and left him alive, which meant either the arsonist made a mistake or the target was never Alexander at all. Maybe someone wanted to send him a message. Maybe someone wanted to take everything he loved to punish him for not selling. Maybe someone wanted him broken and vulnerable so he'd be easier to control. Marcus listens to all of this with growing horror, and he pulls out the documents he found in Elena's lockbox, the birth certificate issued 7 years ago, the fabricated identity that someone created professionally. He shows them to Alexander, and the billionaire's face goes white. He reaches for his phone with hands that are steadier than they should be, and he makes a call. His voice is calm when he speaks, but there's an urgency underneath. He says, "Get Detective Maria Santos here now. Tell her it's about Catherine. Tell her someone finally found proof." Marcus asks who Detective Santos is, and Alexander explains that she was the rookie cop assigned to the Cross Estate fire investigation back in 1997. She was 24 years old, fresh out of the academy, and she was the one who documented the accelerant patterns that suggested professional arson. She was the one who questioned the DNA evidence, who pointed out the inconsistencies in the official report. And she was silenced by her superiors, told to drop it, transferred to a different precinct when she wouldn't stop asking questions. But Santos never let it go. She spent her entire career quietly investigating, gathering evidence, building a case that she could never officially pursue because everyone above her had made it clear the Crossfire case was closed. Over the years, Santos and Alexander developed an unofficial partnership. She'd share information she uncovered, and he'd fund private investigations that she couldn't conduct through official channels. They were both obsessed with finding the truth, both convinced that someone powerful had covered up a murder. If Elena is really Catherine, if she's been alive all this time, then someone with serious power and serious resources helped her disappear. Someone gave her a new identity, created her paper trail, made Elena Rivera exist where Catherine Cross used to be. That level of identity creation requires government connections or access to systems that most people can't touch, witness protection programs, intelligence agencies, or very expensive private firms that cater to people who need to vanish completely. Alexander looks at Marcus and says something that makes the room feel smaller, colder. "If your wife is my daughter, then she's been running from someone for 28 years. Someone dangerous enough that she chose poverty and anonymity over wealth and her real name. Someone who scared a 17-year-old girl so badly that she faked her own death and never looked back." Marcus is about to respond when Alexander's head of security rushes into the study carrying a tablet. His face is pale, his voice urgent. He says, "Sir, you need to see this." He pulls up security footage from earlier that day, from when Marcus first arrived at the estate. The footage shows Marcus walking up to the gate, arguing with security, making a scene. But that's not what the security chief is focused on. He rewinds and enhances a different part of the frame, showing a black sedan parked down the street with tinted windows. The car had been there for hours before Marcus arrived, and within 30 seconds of Marcus entering the estate, someone in that car made a phone call. The security chief tracked the vehicle through traffic cameras after it left, and it went directly to a government building downtown. Not police headquarters. Something else. Something that made the security chief nervous enough to bring it to Alexander immediately. Someone was watching the estate, waiting for something, and Marcus's arrival triggered an immediate response. Before anyone can process what this means, Alexander's phone rings. Unknown number. He hesitates, looks at Marcus, then answers on speaker. The voice that comes through is distorted, run through software that makes it impossible to identify whether it's male or female, young or old. But the words are clear and cold and terrifying. The voice says, Mr. Cross, you should know your guest put your daughter in danger. Again, some secrets are kept for a reason. There's a pause where everyone in the room stops breathing, and then the voice continues. We've protected Catherine for 28 years. We've kept her safe, kept her hidden, kept her alive. And now this man has connected the dots that were supposed to stay scattered forever. You need to send him away. You need to forget this conversation happened. You need to accept that your daughter died in 1997, or the people who wanted her dead then will finish what they started. This isn't a threat, Mr. Cross. This is a courtesy, because of what your family has been through, because we actually care about Catherine's survival. But our protection only works if she stays dead. Do you understand? The line goes dead. Alexander's hand is shaking, so badly he drops the phone. Marcus feels his heart hammering in his chest because someone just confirmed everything they suspected and made it infinitely worse. Elena is Catherine. She's alive, and whoever helped her fake her death 20 years ago is still watching, still protecting her, still making sure no one finds out the truth. But who are they? Why would anyone protect Catherine Cross for 3 decades unless they were either very good or very guilty? Marcus thinks about his wife going to work this morning, kissing him goodbye, completely unaware that her husband has just blown open a secret that might get them all killed. He thinks about Sophia at school, innocent and oblivious, possibly being watched by people who view her existence as a complication in a decades-old cover-up. Alexander looks at Marcus with an expression that's equal parts hope and terror, and he says something that changes everything. He says, we need to bring Elena in. Now. Before whoever made that call decides to eliminate the problem instead of warning us about it. But Marcus shakes his head because he knows his wife better than this stranger does, even if he's only just learning who she really is. He says if we spook her, if she thinks her cover is blown, she'll run. She's been prepared to run for 28 years. She probably has emergency cash hidden, fake IDs, escape routes planned. The moment she suspects we know, she'll disappear and take Sophia with her, and we'll never find them. Alexander wants to argue, but he knows Marcus is right. So they're stuck. They've uncovered a secret that puts everyone in danger, and they can't confront the one person who has all the answers. So now we know someone powerful wanted Catherine dead, and might still want Elena dead. If this story is giving you chills and you're still not subscribed to Olivia the Storyteller, I honestly don't know what will convince you. We've got conspiracy, cover-up, a billionaire's dead daughter who's actually alive, and mysterious protectors who might be heroes or villains. We don't know yet. Drop a comment telling me who you think is behind this conspiracy. Is it Alexander's business partner, Richard Hendricks? Is it someone in the police department who buried the investigation? Is it a government agency running a shadow operation? Or is it someone closer to the family than anyone suspected? Someone who's been hiding in plain sight for 20 years? Comment your theories right now, because the next chapter is going to reveal something that will make your jaw drop. We're about to find out what happens when Elena realizes her husband knows the truth, and trust me, you need to be here for that conversation. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller if you haven't already, because this story is about to go places you won't believe. Marcus's first instinct after that terrifying phone call is to get to his family, to make sure Elena and Sophia are safe, because suddenly the abstract threat of a decades-old conspiracy has become immediate and real. His hands are shaking as he pulls out his phone and dials Elena's number, and he's praying to a God he's not sure he believes in that she'll answer, that she'll be at work complaining about a difficult patient or asking him to pick up milk on the way home. Normal things. Safe things. The phone rings once, twice, 3 times, and Marcus's heart is climbing into his throat because Elena always answers. Always. She keeps her phone volume high specifically, so she never misses a call about Sophia, never misses an emergency. The phone goes to voicemail, and Marcus hears his wife's recorded voice saying, "Leave a message, and I'll call you back." And that familiar sound in this moment feels like a punch to the gut. He calls again immediately. No answer. Alexander is watching him with an expression that says he understands this particular flavor of panic, the terror of not being able to reach someone you love when you know they might be in danger. Marcus's mind is racing through possibilities, trying to convince himself there's a reasonable explanation. Maybe Elena's in surgery and can't have her phone. Maybe she's in a patient room where phones have to be silenced. Maybe she's in the cafeteria and doesn't hear it ringing. But Marcus knows his wife's schedule, knows she doesn't have surgery shifts today, knows she would have felt the vibration even if the ringer was off. Something is wrong. He calls the hospital directly, asks for the ER desk, and when someone finally answers, he's talking so fast he has to slow down and repeat himself. He says, "This is Marcus Rivera. I'm trying to reach my wife Elena Rivera. She's a nurse there. Can you tell me if she's working?" There's a pause, the sound of computer keys clicking, and then the receptionist says Elena left early today, around 10 this morning. She said there was a family emergency. She clocked out and left, and we haven't heard from her since. Family emergency. Marcus feels ice water flood his veins because there is no family emergency. Elena's mother is dead. Her father is supposedly dead. She has no siblings, no relatives who would need her. The only family she has is Marcus and Sophia, and Marcus is standing in a billionaire's mansion learning that his wife has been living a lie for 20 years. He hangs up and immediately dials Sophia's school, his daughter's elementary school, where she's supposed to be safe in her first-grade classroom, learning to read and doing art projects. The school secretary answers cheerfully, and Marcus interrupts her greeting with a question that comes out more like a demand. He says, "I need to know if my daughter Sophia Rivera is still at school. Has anyone picked her up early?" The secretary sounds confused, a little defensive, and she says, "Yes, Mr. Rivera, your daughter was picked up at 11:30 this morning. We have it logged here. Your sister-in-law Maria came to get her, said there was a family situation, and she had permission to take Sophia for the day. She had proper ID and knew all the right information, so we released Sophia to her care per your wife's authorization." Marcus can't breathe. He physically cannot get air into his lungs because Elena doesn't have a sister. She doesn't have a sister-in-law named Maria. She doesn't have any family at all. That's the whole point. That's what she's always said. Someone took his daughter. Someone walked into Sophia's school, lied to get access to her, and took her. And they did it professionally, knowing exactly what to say, having documentation prepared, understanding the school's procedures well enough to bypass them. Marcus manages to gasp out a question, asking what time this happened, and the secretary says 11:30, about 2 hours ago. 2 hours. His 6-year-old daughter has been in the hands of strangers for 2 hours, and he didn't know, couldn't protect her, was standing in a mansion having a conversation about conspiracy theories while his child was being taken. He tells the secretary to call the police immediately, that Sophia was taken by someone unauthorized, that this is a kidnapping. The woman's cheerful tone vanishes, replaced by panic, and Marcus hangs up because he needs to move, needs to do something, needs to find his family before it's too late. Alexander is already in motion before Marcus finishes the call. He's shouting orders to his security team, telling them to prepare vehicles, to contact Detective Santos and get her to the Rivera apartment immediately, to pull traffic camera footage from around the school, to activate whatever resources he has that can find a missing child. He looks at Marcus with an expression that's both commanding and compassionate, and he says, "We're going to find them. I have resources you can't imagine. I have people who can track anyone anywhere. We will find your daughter and my daughter. Do you understand me? But we need to move now." Alexander's driver brings a car around within 60 seconds, a black SUV with tinted windows and an engine that sounds like controlled violence. Marcus climbs in, and they're speeding through city streets toward his apartment while Alexander makes call after call, mobilizing what sounds like a private army. He's calling his head of security, his technology people, his legal team, and Detective Maria Santos, who apparently has been waiting for this call for 20 years. They reach Marcus's apartment building in 15 minutes, and Marcus is out of the car before it fully stops, running through the lobby and up the stairs because the elevator is too slow. His apartment is on the 3rd floor, and when he rounds the corner, his heart stops completely. The door is open. Not kicked in, not broken, just open, swinging slightly in the draft from the hallway window. Marcus approaches slowly because some part of him knows that what he's about to see will change everything, will make this nightmare undeniably real. He pushes the door fully open and steps inside, and the apartment that he left this morning as his home has been transformed into a crime scene. There are signs of a struggle, not violent but urgent. The couch cushions are disturbed. Elena's purse is on the floor with its contents scattered. The lockbox, where she kept important documents, is open and empty, everything valuable gone. And on the floor by the hallway, lying like an abandoned child, is Sophia's stuffed rabbit, the one she's had since she was 2, the one she carries everywhere and can't sleep without. She would never leave it behind voluntarily. Never. Detective Maria Santos arrives within 10 minutes, and she's exactly what Marcus expected and nothing like it at the same time. She's in her early 50s, black woman with sharp, intelligent eyes that miss nothing, wearing a detective's badge on her hip, and the kind of professional competence that comes from decades of dealing with the worst humanity has to offer. She walks through the apartment cataloging details, taking photographs with her phone, asking Marcus questions in a calm voice that somehow makes everything feel more manageable. She asks when he last spoke to Elena, what time Sophia was taken from school, whether Marcus noticed anyone following them recently, or any unusual activity around their home. Marcus answers automatically, his mind still stuck on that stuffed rabbit, lying on the floor like evidence of his failure to protect his family. Santos picks it up carefully, examining it, and she says children don't leave their comfort items behind unless they're confused or scared or being moved quickly. But there's no sign of violence here. No blood, no broken furniture, no indication that anyone fought. This was fast and professional. Whoever took them knew what they were doing. Alexander's security team sweeps the apartment for bugs and cameras, and they find 3 surveillance devices hidden in places Marcus would never have looked. One behind the microwave, one inside the smoke detector, one in the bathroom vent. Someone has been watching them, listening to them, monitoring their entire lives, and Marcus had no idea. He thinks about all the conversations he and Elena have had in this apartment, all the private moments, all the times he questioned her past or asked about her family, and someone was listening. Someone knew the exact moment Marcus started investigating his wife's identity. Someone knew when he hired the private detective, when he found the newspaper clipping, when he decided to confront Alexander Cross. They've been watching and waiting, and the moment Marcus got too close to the truth, they acted. Santos looks at the devices with an expression that's somehow both surprised and not surprised at all, and she says this is professional surveillance equipment, government grade, or high-end corporate espionage. This isn't some private detective operation. This is serious resources, serious money, serious motivation. Alexander makes more calls, and Marcus hears him talking about traffic cameras and facial recognition software and accessing databases that civilians shouldn't be able to access. He's calling in favors from people who owe him, leveraging his wealth and power in ways that would normally take weeks through official channels, but are happening in real time because a billionaire's granddaughter is missing. Detective Santos pulls Marcus aside and tells him something that makes the conspiracy feel even larger and more terrifying. She says, I've been investigating the Crossfire for 28 years, and I have evidence that the original investigation was buried by someone high up in the police department. The fire marshal who ruled it accidental received payments totaling $200,000 in the months after the fire. The lead arson investigator was transferred to a cushy administrative position and told to close the case. And the person who coordinated all of this, who made sure no one looked too closely at the evidence, was the chief of staff to Alexander's business partner Richard Hendricks. That chief of staff is now the chief of police of the city. The man in charge of law enforcement, the person who's supposed to protect people like Marcus and Elena and Sophia, is potentially part of the conspiracy that tried to kill Catherine Cross 20 years ago. Marcus feels like the ground beneath him is disintegrating because if the chief of police is involved, if the conspiracy goes that high, then who can they trust? Who can help them? Detective Santos must see the despair on his face because she puts a hand on his shoulder and says, I've built my own network over the years. People I trust absolutely. People who weren't part of the cover-up and who've been waiting for a chance to expose it. We're not alone in this, but we have to be smart. We have to assume anyone in an official capacity might be compromised. She pulls out her phone and shows Marcus photographs, dozens of them documenting meetings and money transfers and connections that span decades. She has pictures of Richard Hendricks, Alexander's former business partner, who's now a state senator with presidential ambitions, meeting with the arson investigator from 1997. She has bank records showing payments from shell companies registered to Hendricks's law firm going to various people involved in the Crossfire investigation. And she has something that makes Marcus's blood run cold. She has a photograph taken 3 weeks ago of someone following Elena to work. A professional tale, someone trained in surveillance, And in the background of the photo, you can see a car registered to a company that's owned by a subsidiary that's ultimately controlled by Senator Richard Hendricks. They've been watching Elena for weeks, maybe longer. They knew she was Catherine Cross, or at least suspected, and they were waiting for something. Waiting for her to make contact with her father? Waiting for her to try to claim her inheritance? Or waiting for someone like Marcus to stumble onto the truth and force their hand? Alexander's technology team arrives at the apartment, and they hook into the building's security system, pulling footage from the cameras in the lobby and hallways. The footage shows two people entering the building that morning at 10:45, 15 minutes after Elena left work claiming a family emergency. They're dressed like delivery people, carrying packages, looking completely normal except for the way they move. Too smooth, too aware of their surroundings, too professional. They keep their faces angled away from cameras like they know exactly where every lens is positioned. The footage shows them going to Marcus's apartment, and 3 minutes later, they leave with Elena and Sophia. Not dragging them, not forcing them. Elena is walking calmly, holding Sophia's hand, talking to her daughter like everything is fine. Sophia looks confused but not scared. Whatever these people showed Elena, whatever they said to her, convinced her to go with them willingly. The license plate on their vehicle traces back to a shell company, which traces to another company, which eventually dead-ends at a corporate structure so complex it would take lawyers weeks to unravel. But Alexander's people are good, and within an hour they have a name. The vehicle is registered to a security firm that provides services to Senator Richard Hendricks' office. Not conclusive proof that the senator is involved, but close enough that Detective Santos makes a call to federal prosecutors she trusts, people outside the local chain of command who won't be influenced by the chief of police. She's starting a federal investigation right now, in real time, using Elena's kidnapping as the trigger to finally expose a corruption that's been festering for 20 years. She tells Marcus this might actually be the break they needed, as horrible as it sounds. The conspiracy has operated in shadows for decades, but kidnapping forces them into the light. There will be records, digital footprints, witnesses. They can't make a billionaire's daughter and granddaughter disappear without leaving traces, and Detective Santos knows how to follow those traces. But Marcus doesn't care about federal investigations or exposing corruption. He cares about finding his wife and daughter before something happens to them. He asks the only question that matters. Where will they take them? Detective Santos and Alexander exchange a look, and Santos says if this is Hendricks' operation, if he's trying to tie up loose ends before his presidential campaign, then he'd want Catherine somewhere secure, somewhere he controls completely. Alexander's face goes white, and he says, "I know where." He pulls up a map on his phone and points to a location 2 hours outside the city. Hendricks owns a private estate there, inherited from his family, a place with enough land and isolation that you could do whatever you wanted and no one would know. The property is registered under a trust, technically not connected to him directly, but Alexander knows because he's been investigating Hendricks for years. He's mapped out every asset, every property, every connection, building a case even though he didn't have proof. Until now, Alexander's security team is preparing to move out, coordinating with Detective Santos's trusted people, when someone remembers Elena's hospital locker. If she knew she might be in danger, if she was preparing for something like this, she might have left evidence somewhere. Marcus gives them permission to search her locker at the hospital, and they find something taped to the back panel, hidden where only someone specifically looking would discover it. A USB drive. Such a small thing, no bigger than Marcus's thumb, but when they plug it into a laptop, it contains files that make everyone in the room stop breathing. There are photographs of Alexander's business partner Richard Hendricks meeting with the arson investigator from 1997, dated 2 weeks before the crossfire. There are bank records showing payments from Hendricks' accounts to the fire marshal, to the lead detective, to various people involved in shutting down the investigation. There's correspondence, emails that were supposed to be deleted but somehow survived, discussing how to handle the cross situation, how to make sure the fire was ruled accidental, how to ensure Alexander never discovered what his partner had been doing. And then there's a document that changes everything. A letter, handwritten, dated October 10th, 1997, 5 days before the fire. It's from Victoria Cross, addressed to Catherine, and the words are shaking and urgent like they were written by someone who knew she was running out of time. The letter says, "My darling Catherine, if you're reading this, then I'm likely dead. Your father's business partner has been stealing from us for years, millions of dollars that he's funneled into offshore accounts and shell companies. I've gathered proof, documented everything, and I was going to report him this week. But I've seen the way he looks at me lately, and I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what he might do to protect himself. I need you to know that I've hidden copies of all my evidence in your music box, the one your grandmother gave you. If something happens to me, you need to get that box to the authorities. You need to make sure Richard Hendricks pays for what he's done. Tell your father I'm sorry. Tell him I love him, even though he's made mistakes. Tell him to trust you. You're stronger than he thinks you are, and you're the only one who can finish what I started." Marcus reads the letter 3 times, and each time it hits him harder. Victoria Cross knew she was in danger. She documented evidence of Hendricks's embezzlement, and she died 5 days later in a fire that was ruled accidental. Catherine survived that fire somehow, grabbed the music box like her mother told her to, and went into hiding for 28 years because she knew Hendricks would kill her to protect his secret. Elena, has been carrying this burden alone for almost 3 decades, protecting evidence that could destroy one of the most powerful men in the state, living in poverty and fear and isolation rather than let a murderer go free. And now Hendricks has her. Now he has their daughter. Now he has the one person who knows where Victoria hid the evidence that could end his political career and send him to prison for the rest of his life. The USB drive has one more file, and when they open it, they hear a voice that stops everyone cold. It's a woman speaking, her tone shaking but determined, and Alexander makes a sound like he's been shot because he recognizes that voice. It's Victoria. It's his dead wife speaking to him from 28 years in the past, her words preserved on a recording that she made days before she died. Her voice says, "Alexander, if you're hearing this, then I'm likely dead, and I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you, even when you hurt me, even when you made choices that broke my heart. I forgive you for the affair. I understand why you did it, even if I can't accept it. But there's something more important than our marriage, something that's going to get me killed if Hendricks finds out what I know. He's been embezzling millions from the company. I have proof. Bank statements, wire transfers, emails, everything. I've hidden it all in Catherine's music box, the antique one from my mother. If I don't survive, you need to find that box. You need to make Catherine tell you where it is. She knows. She's the only one I trusted with this secret. Alexander, please trust our daughter. She's stronger than you think. She's braver than you know. And she's the only one who can make them pay for what they've done." The recording cuts off, and the room is silent except for Alexander's breathing, which has become ragged and harsh like he's been running. A mother left a message from beyond the grave, a child is missing, and a wife has been living in hiding for 28 years. If you're emotionally invested enough to keep watching but not invested enough to subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller, that's your choice, I guess. But let me ask you something. If this was your family, if your wife turned out to be someone else entirely, if your daughter was taken by people connected to a senator and the chief of police, wouldn't you want people paying attention? Wouldn't you want witnesses to what's happening? Subscribe right now if you want to see how this ends, if you want to know whether Marcus finds his family, whether Elena survives, whether that music box still exists after 20 years. Drop a comment telling me what you think is in that music box. Victoria said she had bank statements and emails, but is there something more? Something worth killing for even after almost 3 decades? And who exactly is them that Victoria refers to in her recording? Is it just Hendricks, or is this conspiracy bigger than anyone realizes? Comment your theories, because Marcus is about to make a decision that could cost him everything, and you need to be here when it happens. Alexander Cross stands in Marcus's apartment staring at Victoria's letter, and suddenly his eyes go wide like a memory just surfaced from depths he thought were empty. He says, "The music box. Catherine had an antique music box that my mother gave her on her 10th birthday. It was Victorian, mahogany with inlaid mother of pearl, played a French lullaby when you opened it. Catherine kept it on her dresser, used it to store her jewelry and little keepsakes. I haven't thought about that box in decades because I assumed it was destroyed in the fire like everything else. But if Victoria had evidence in it, if Catherine managed to get it out of the house, then it's been somewhere all this time, preserved, waiting." He turns to Marcus with an expression that's equal parts hope and desperation, and he asks, Have you ever seen a music box in your apartment? Old, ornate, the kind of thing that doesn't fit with your furniture or your wife's taste. Marcus's mind is racing backward through 7 years of marriage, through their small apartment and Elena's minimal possessions, and then he remembers. There is a music box. He's seen it exactly twice in 7 years, both times when Elena thought he wasn't looking. It's in the back of their bedroom closet, behind the winter coats they never use because they can't afford a ski trip, wrapped in cloth like something precious and dangerous. He asked about it once, early in their marriage, and Elena's face went completely blank in that way she has when she's hiding something painful. She said it was from someone I lost, and her voice made it clear the conversation was over. Marcus respected her boundaries, respected her grief, never pushed for more information. He thought she was talking about dead parents, or maybe a grandmother who'd given her a family heirloom. He didn't know she was talking about her mother who was murdered 20 years ago, about evidence that could destroy a senator and expose a decades-old conspiracy. Marcus tells Alexander yes, there's a music box, and they're moving before he finishes the sentence, racing back through the apartment to the bedroom that Marcus shares with a woman he's realizing he never really knew. The closet is small and overstuffed with their limited wardrobe, and Marcus has to push past jackets and dresses to reach the back corner where he knows Elena keeps things she doesn't want him to see. His hands find the wrapped bundle immediately, and it's heavier than he expected, solid in a way that speaks to quality craftsmanship and age. He pulls it out carefully, and even through the cloth wrapping he can feel the texture of carved wood, the slight irregularity of handmade inlay work. Alexander is practically vibrating with anticipation as Marcus unwraps it, and when the music box is finally revealed, the billionaire makes a sound that's part sob and part prayer. It's exactly as he described. Mahogany, wood darkened with age, mother of pearl inlaid in delicate floral patterns across the lid, brass hinges that have tarnished to a deep green. And on one corner, barely visible unless you're looking for it, there's fire damage. A scorched edge, wood that's been charred and then carefully cleaned, evidence that this object survived something that destroyed everything around it. The music box is locked, a small keyhole in the front that would require a delicate key Marcus has never seen. He's about to suggest they find a way to pick it when Alexander stops him with a hand on his wrist. He says, "Don't force it. That lock is over 100 years old, and if we break it, we might damage whatever's inside." He calls for his technology expert, a young woman named Sarah who's been quietly working in the corner documenting everything they've found. She approaches the music box with the kind of reverence you'd show a religious artifact, pulling out a set of tools that look like they belong in a museum conservation lab. She examines the lock under magnification, studies the mechanism, and then uses a series of tiny picks to work the tumblers with patience Marcus doesn't have. Every second that passes is another second Elena and Sophia are in the hands of people who've already proven they're willing to kill. Marcus can feel his heart hammering against his ribs, can feel sweat forming on his palms, can feel the weight of every decision he's made that led to this moment pressing down on him like physical force. It takes Sarah 7 minutes that feel like 7 hours, and then there's a soft click that sounds like the most beautiful thing Marcus has ever heard. The lock releases. Sarah steps back, and everyone in the room holds their breath as Alexander reaches forward with trembling hands to open the music box his mother gave his daughter 35 years ago. The lid lifts, and the mechanism inside engages, and suddenly the room is filled with the delicate tinkling sound of a French lullaby, the kind of music that belongs to a different century, to a time before fires and murder and conspiracy. The sound is haunting and beautiful and deeply sad, and Alexander's face crumples because this is the sound Catherine would have heard as a child, the sound that accompanied her girlhood dreams before everything went wrong. The music plays for about 30 seconds and then winds down, the notes growing slower and fainter until there's silence again. And in that silence, they look at what Victoria Cross hid 28 years ago. The music box is packed with documents, carefully folded and arranged to maximize the limited space. There are photographs showing Richard Hendricks meeting with various people, dates and locations written on the back in Victoria's handwriting. There are bank statements highlighted to show wire transfers, money moving from legitimate business accounts into shell companies with names that mean nothing until you follow the paper trail. There are emails printed on paper that's yellowed with age, correspondence between Hendricks and an accountant discussing how to hide the embezzlement, how to make it look like legitimate business expenses, how to ensure Alexander never discovered what was happening. And there's a ledger, a physical book with Victoria's handwriting documenting every transaction she discovered, every piece of evidence she'd found, a timeline that shows Hendricks had been stealing from the company for at least 5 years before she caught him. The total amount is staggering. $47 million over 5 years, siphoned from a business Alexander had built with his own hands, stolen by a man he trusted like a brother. Detective Santos photographs every document with her phone, creating digital backups in real time, uploading them to secure cloud storage that multiple federal prosecutors now have access to. She's muttering as she works, saying things like, "This is airtight, this is everything we'd need for prosecution. This would have put him away for decades, even back in 1997. Marcus watches her work and thinks about Victoria Cross, a woman he never met, who died trying to expose this corruption. She could have walked away. She could have ignored what she discovered, could have divorced Alexander and taken her share of the money and lived in comfortable denial. But she didn't. She documented everything, gathered proof, prepared to report a man who was powerful enough and connected enough to have her killed. And she was killed, along with what everyone thought was her daughter, in a fire that was ruled accidental by investigators who'd been paid to look the other way. Marcus thinks about the courage that took, the moral clarity to risk everything for what was right, and he understands why Elena became a nurse instead of claiming her inheritance. She's her mother's daughter. She values justice over wealth, values integrity over comfort, values truth over safety. Alexander pieces together the conspiracy as they examine the evidence, his voice hollow with the kind of anger that's been building for 20 years. He says, Victoria discovered Hendricks was embezzling in early October 1997. She started gathering evidence, probably didn't tell me because she knew I'd confront him immediately without proof. She was building an airtight case, documenting everything, preparing to go to the authorities. But Hendricks found out. He learned about Victoria's investigation through a corrupt police officer who's now the chief of police. Marcus asks how Hendricks could have known, and Detective Santos explains that police corruption often starts small. Chief Thomas Wayne was a patrol officer in 1997, and he was on Hendricks's payroll for minor things, probably feeding him information about police activities, maybe helping him avoid certain investigations. When Victoria started asking questions about shell companies and offshore accounts, when she requested public records that mentioned Hendricks's name, Wayne would have been alerted through routine police monitoring. He told Hendricks that Alexander Cross's wife was investigating him, and Hendricks made a decision. He was going to eliminate the entire Cross family. Make it look like an accident or maybe like teenage rebellion gone wrong. Kill Victoria before she could report him. Kill Alexander so there'd be no one to pursue justice. Kill Catherine so there'd be no heir to claim the company or question what happened. The plan was execute the fire while Alexander was in the guest house, separate from the main mansion because of the affair and the marital tension. Victoria would be in her bedroom. Catherine would be in hers. The fire would start in multiple locations on the second floor where they slept, and by the time anyone realized what was happening, it would be too late. Professional arsonists hired through Hendricks's criminal connections set the fire at 3 a.m. when everyone was sleeping deeply. But Catherine wasn't in her room. She'd snuck out to meet her boyfriend, something she did occasionally when her parents fought, climbing down the trellis outside her window and walking to a park a mile away where she'd meet this boy Alexander never knew about. She was 17 and rebellious and in love the way teenagers are, with the kind of intensity that makes them do stupid, dangerous things without thinking about consequences. When Catherine returned home around 4 a.m, climbing back up that trellis to her window, she found the house on fire. She could see flames through her mother's bedroom window. She could hear her father shouting in the distance. And she saw a man running from the property, someone she recognized because she'd seen him at company parties and family dinners. She saw Richard Hendricks fleeing the scene of her mother's murder. Detective Santos takes over the narrative because she's pieced this together from years of investigation, from conversations with witnesses who've since died, from evidence that was buried but not completely destroyed. She says Catherine was smart enough to know she was in danger. She was 17 years old watching her house burn with her mother inside, and she just witnessed her father's business partner running from the scene. She knew if Hendricks realized she'd survived and seen him, she'd be next. So Catherine didn't call for help. She didn't run to her father. She ran to the garden shed at the edge of the property where she'd hidden her music box days earlier after her mother gave her Victoria's letter and told her to keep it safe. Catherine grabbed the music box and she ran. She had cash in her pocket from babysitting, she had the clothes on her back, and she had evidence that could send a killer to prison. She was 17 years old and completely alone, watching everything she knew burn to the ground, knowing she could never go back. Santos's voice gets softer as she explains what happened next because this part is personal for her. Her partner in 1997 was a cop named James Mitchell, a good man who'd been on the force for 20 years and had started to notice irregularities in how certain cases were being handled. When the Cross Estate fire was ruled accidental despite clear evidence of arson, Mitchell started asking questions. He was the one who documented the accelerant patterns. He was the one who noticed the DNA evidence felt planted. And he was the one who, 3 days after the fire, encountered a terrified teenage girl hiding in a homeless shelter downtown. Catherine told him everything. She told him she'd witnessed Hendricks at the scene. She told him about her mother's investigation and the evidence in the music box. And Mitchell made a decision that probably saved her life, but cost him his career and eventually his life. He helped her disappear. He used his connections to create a false identity for Catherine Cross, giving her the name Elena Rivera and documents that would hold up under casual scrutiny. He planted fake DNA evidence that confirmed Catherine had died in the fire, using samples he collected from her room before the scene was fully processed. He told Alexander Cross that his daughter was definitively dead, that he was sorry for his loss, that he should try to find peace. And then Mitchell told Catherine to run and never look back, to never contact her father, to live as Elena Rivera until it was safe to reveal the truth. Marcus asks why Mitchell did it, why he'd risk everything to help a teenage girl he didn't know. Santos says because Mitchell knew the corruption went high enough that bringing Catherine forward would get her killed. Chief Wayne was already blocking his investigation, already pushing for the case to be closed. The fire marshal, who'd found the accelerant traces, was suddenly claiming he'd made a mistake. The DNA lab was confirming results that seemed too clean, too definitive. Mitchell saw a conspiracy unfolding and knew he couldn't fight it through official channels, so he did the only thing he could. He saved the witness and preserved the evidence by making everyone believe both were gone. Mitchell was forced into early retirement 6 months later, officially for medical reasons, but really because he'd become a liability to people who wanted the Cross case closed. He spent the rest of his life waiting for it to be safe to bring Catherine back, waiting for an opportunity to expose Hendricks, but it never came. Hendricks's power grew. He went from business partner to corporate executive to state legislator to senator. Chief Wayne rose through the police ranks, protecting Hendricks the entire way. And Mitchell died of a heart attack in 2015, taking the secret of Catherine's survival to his grave. Except he told one person. He told his partner Maria Santos, made her promise to keep watching, keep investigating, keep waiting for the moment when justice could finally be served. Alexander is crying openly now, tears streaming down his face as he realizes his daughter has been alive all this time, that she's been living in poverty and fear for 28 years because it was the only way to stay alive. Marcus asks why Catherine never reached out after Mitchell died, why she didn't contact her father once she was safe. Santos says because she wasn't safe. Hendricks and Wayne have been monitoring Alexander for decades, waiting for any sign that Catherine survived, any indication that the evidence still existed. Alexander's phones have been tapped. His security team has been infiltrated. His communications have been monitored. If Catherine had made contact, they would have known immediately, and both she and Alexander would have been in danger. So Catherine stayed dead. She became Elena Rivera completely, worked as a nurse, married a good man, had a daughter, and carried her mother's evidence in a music box she kept locked in a closet, waiting for the moment when it would be safe to use it. That moment never came, until Marcus stumbled onto the truth and forced everything into the open. The current danger is immediate and obvious. Senator Richard Hendricks still holds enormous power. He has connections throughout law enforcement and government. He's about to announce a presidential campaign that would make him even more untouchable. Chief of Police Thomas Wayne is his enforcer, the man who's protected him for 28 years and has committed too many crimes himself to ever let the truth come out. They've been monitoring Alexander for decades, which means they knew the moment Marcus showed up at the mansion asking questions about Catherine. They knew their window was closing, that the secret they'd killed to protect was about to be exposed. So they took Elena and Sophia. They have Catherine Cross, the only person alive who witnessed Hendricks at the scene of the fire. They have her daughter, leveraged to ensure Catherine's cooperation. But here's what's interesting, what Detective Santos points out as they examine the situation. There's been no ransom demand. No one has called asking for the music box or threatening the hostages. Which means Hendricks isn't just trying to recover the evidence. He's searching for additional copies, trying to determine whether Catherine made backups, whether there are other people who know the truth. He's buying time to figure out how extensive the leak is before he makes his next move. Marcus is examining the music box more carefully now, running his hands along the interior, checking for hidden compartments the way people do in movies. And he finds one. There's a false bottom that springs open when you press on the corner correctly, revealing a space about 2 inches deep. Inside is another USB drive, smaller and more modern than the one they found in Elena's hospital locker. This one is labeled in Elena's handwriting, and the label makes Marcus's breath catch in his throat. It says, "For Catherine's children." Elena made a backup. She took her mother's evidence and digitized it, formatted it for modern legal prosecution, added context and testimony, and probably everything that's happened over the past 28 years. This isn't just Victoria's evidence from 1997. This is a comprehensive case against Richard Hendricks and Thomas Wayne, documenting crimes that span 3 decades. Marcus plugs the drive into the laptop, and they see folders labeled with dates and names and case numbers. There's everything from the original embezzlement to the arson investigation to murders that were ruled accidental but show patterns consistent with Hendricks's methods. There's documentation of political corruption, of bribes paid and favors exchanged, of a conspiracy so extensive it touches dozens of people in positions of power. Detective Santos is frantically copying files, sending them to multiple secure locations, ensuring that even if something happens to the original drive, the evidence will survive. She's making calls to federal prosecutors, to FBI field offices outside of the local jurisdiction, to people she trusts absolutely. This is happening. After 28 years, the case against Richard Hendricks is finally going to move forward. But Santos looks at Marcus with an expression that says the next part is going to be the hardest, and Marcus knows what she's about to say before she says it. They can bring charges against Hendricks now. They can issue arrest warrants, mobilize federal resources, begin the process of justice. But doing so will put Elena and Sophia in immediate danger. The moment Hendricks knows his conspiracy is exposed, the moment he realizes there's no way to cover up his crimes anymore, he'll have no reason to keep his hostages alive. They become witnesses instead of leverage. They become evidence instead of negotiating tools. And Hendricks has shown over 28 years that he's willing to kill witnesses without hesitation. Detective Santos's phone buzzes with an incoming text from an unknown number, and everyone in the room freezes. She opens it, and there's a video file attached. Size suggests it's short, maybe 30 seconds. Santos hits play, and they see Elena and Sophia in what looks like a warehouse, concrete walls and industrial lighting, the kind of anonymous space that could be anywhere. Elena is seated in a metal chair, not tied but clearly not free to leave. Sophia is beside her, holding her mother's hand, looking confused and scared but trying to be brave the way 6-year-olds do when they don't understand what's happening but know their parent needs them to be strong. The video is live, the timestamp in the corner showing it's being recorded right now, this moment, while they're watching. And then someone off camera says something, and Elena starts speaking, her voice steady but her eyes showing pure terror. She says, "Marcus, I'm sorry. I should have told you everything. I should have trusted you with the truth, instead of living a lie for 7 years. But I was so afraid, and I thought if you didn't know, you and Sophia would be safe. I was wrong. My past caught up with us, and now our daughter is in danger because of choices I made when I was 17 years old. They're telling me that if you use the evidence, if you go to the authorities with what my mother documented, they'll kill both of us. They're saying the only way Sophia survives is if you give them the music box. All of it. The original documents, the USB drives, everything. Please, Marcus. I know you want justice. I know my mother deserves justice. But our daughter deserves to live. Give them what they want. Let me die if you have to, but protect Sophia. That's all I'm asking. Protect our baby girl. The video cuts off abruptly, and Marcus feels like someone has reached into his chest and torn his heart out. Elena just begged Marcus to let her die to save Sophia, and you're sitting there deciding whether clicking subscribe on Olivia the Storyteller is worth your time. The irony. Think about that for a second. A mother is willing to sacrifice herself for her child, willing to let a murderer go free if it means her 6-year-old daughter lives. And some of you can't even click a button to support the storyteller who's bringing you this emotional journey. While those of you with commitment issues work through your feelings in the comments, let's see what Marcus decides, because this next choice will define him as a man and a father. Does he give up the evidence and hope Hendricks honors his word? Does he trust federal prosecutors to act fast enough to save his family? Or does he do something else entirely, something dangerous and desperate and maybe completely insane? Drop a comment right now telling me what you would do in Marcus's position. Would you sacrifice justice for your child? Would you risk your family for the truth? There's no right answer, and that's what makes this so devastating. Comment your choice, and then stay with me, because Marcus is about to make a decision that will either save everyone or destroy everything. Marcus is staring at the video of his wife and daughter in that warehouse, and his hands are shaking so badly he has to set down the laptop before he drops it. Every instinct he has is screaming at him to give Hendricks what he wants, to hand over the music box and the evidence, and everything Victoria cross-dyed protecting if it means Sophia comes home safe. He doesn't care about justice right now. He doesn't care about exposing a senator or avenging a woman he never met. He cares about his 6-year-old daughter who carries her stuffed rabbit everywhere and still believes monsters aren't real, who's sitting in a warehouse with people who've killed before and will kill again without hesitation. Marcus opens his mouth to say they should comply, should make the trade, should do whatever it takes to get his family back. But before he can speak, Alexander's phone rings. Not his personal cell, but a separate device his security team gave him, a secure line that only a handful of people have access to. Alexander looks at the caller ID, and his face goes pale. He says it's Chief Wayne. He's calling directly. This is the negotiation. Alexander puts the call on speaker, and the voice that comes through is smooth and professional, the kind of voice that spent decades giving orders and having them followed without question. Chief Thomas Wayne says, "Mr. Cross, I think it's time we had an honest conversation about a situation that's gotten out of hand. You have something that belongs to people who've been very patient for a very long time. We have 2 people you care about. I believe we can reach an arrangement that serves everyone's interests." Marcus wants to shout into the phone, wants to demand proof of life, wants to threaten this corrupt cop with everything he can think of. But Alexander holds up a hand, keeping his voice calm and measured when he responds. He says, "What kind of arrangement are you proposing, Chief Wayne?" And Wayne's answer is exactly what they expected. He wants the music box. He wants all physical evidence Victoria cross-gathered. He wants every USB drive, every copy, every digital file that exists. In exchange, he'll return Catherine and her daughter unharmed. He suggests a meeting location, an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city, neutral ground where both parties can feel secure. He gives them 2 hours to prepare. He says if anyone contacts law enforcement beyond Detective Santos, who he knows is already involved, the deal is off and the hostages die. He says this with the casual tone of someone ordering coffee, and that's what makes it most terrifying. This man has no moral hesitation. He's killed before. He'll kill again. It's just business to him. Marcus's first instinct, his immediate visceral reaction, is to comply completely. Give them everything. His daughter's life is worth more than justice, more than revenge, more than any amount of evidence or truth. Sophia is 6 years old. She has her whole life ahead of her. She deserves to grow up, to go to college, to fall in love, to have children of her own. She deserves all the things Marcus never got to have because he spent his youth taking care of others instead of building his own dreams. If giving up the evidence means Sophia survives, then Marcus will hand over that music box and never look back. He'll spend the rest of his life knowing a murderer went free, knowing Victoria Cross's death was never avenged, knowing corruption won. But his daughter will be alive. That's all that matters. He starts to say this out loud, starts to tell Alexander they should agree to Wayne's terms, but Detective Santos cuts him off with a look that's both sympathetic and brutally honest. She says, Marcus, I understand what you're feeling. If it were my child, I want to make the trade too. But you need to understand something. They can't let Elena and Sophia go. Not really. Not alive. Santos explains with the kind of patience that comes from years of dealing with hostage situations and criminal psychology. Hendricks has too much to lose. He's a senator with presidential ambitions, and he's about to announce his campaign. If Catherine Cross comes forward as a living witness to his crimes, if she testifies that she saw him fleeing the scene of her mother's murder, if she provides evidence of 28 years of corruption, his political career is over. He goes to prison for the rest of his life. Multiple murders, arson, embezzlement, obstruction of justice, conspiracy charges that would stack into centuries of prison time. And even if Marcus gives up all the physical evidence, even if he hands over every document and drive and file, Hendricks knows that Catherine herself is evidence. She's a witness. She's seen things, knows things, can testify to things that no amount of destroyed documents can erase. The same is true for Sophia. She's seen her mother's kidnappers. She might have overheard conversations. She's a 6-year-old who could say something to a teacher or a friend that would trigger questions Hendricks can't afford to answer. So no matter what Marcus gives them, no matter how completely he complies, Hendricks and Wayne can't let them go. The moment they have the evidence, the moment they confirm there are no other copies, Elena and Sophia become liabilities instead of leverage. And liabilities get eliminated. Marcus feels something cold settle in his chest because he knows Santos is right. He's watched enough crime shows, read enough news stories, understands enough about how these situations end. The hostages almost never survive when the kidnappers have nothing to gain from keeping them alive. But knowing this intellectually and accepting it emotionally are two different things. He's about to argue, about to insist there has to be another way, when Alexander does something unexpected. He looks at Marcus with an expression that's searching and thoughtful, and he asks a question that seems completely random. He says, "Marcus, you told me you worked construction. But there's something about the way you move, the way you assess situations, that reminds me of men I've known who had military or law enforcement training. Where did you grow up? What did your father do?" And Marcus realizes this billionaire is more observant than he gave him credit for, because Marcus has been very careful for many years to hide the parts of his past that don't fit with his construction worker persona. Marcus takes a breath and tells them something he hasn't talked about in over a decade, something Elena doesn't even know because he's never wanted to burden her with the violence that shaped his childhood. He says his father was a federal police officer in Mexico, one of the good ones, one of the honest cops who actually tried to fight the cartels instead of taking their money. His name was Javier Rivera, and he was known in certain circles as a man who couldn't be bought, who couldn't be intimidated, who built cases against cartel members with the kind of meticulous dedication that put dangerous people in prison. Marcus grew up watching his father work, learning tactics and strategies the way other kids learn sports, understanding surveillance and investigation, and how to read people for signs of deception. When Marcus was 12 years old, his father was killed by cartel members who ambushed him outside their home. They shot him 8 times in front of his family. Marcus was standing right there, was supposed to die too, but his father used his last moments to shield Marcus with his own body to give his son a chance to run. Marcus ran. He hid in an alley while the gunmen searched for him, and he watched through a crack in a fence as they shot his father again to make sure he was dead. The trauma of that night, the memory of his father's sacrifice, shaped everything Marcus became. His mother moved them to the United States within a month, using savings and family connections to get them across the border legally, starting over in a country where they didn't speak the language and had no support system. Marcus learned English in American schools. He learned to hide his past, to present as just another immigrant kid trying to make it in a new country. But he never forgot what his father taught him: the tactical thinking, the situational awareness, the understanding of how criminals operate and how law enforcement responds. Marcus joined construction because it was honest work that his father would have respected, because it let him use his hands and his mind, because it kept him away from the violence that had destroyed his family. He's lived a quiet life for 14 years, honoring his father's sacrifice by staying alive and staying good. But he has skills most people don't know about, skills he's kept buried, because the life his father lived, the world his father inhabited, is one Marcus swore he'd never return to. Elena doesn't know any of this. She thinks his father died in a car accident, that Marcus's reticence to talk about his past is just grief. She doesn't know her husband understands violence intimately, understands how to survive it, understands how to fight back when peaceful options run out. Alexander listens to this confession, and something changes in his expression. He looks at Marcus differently now, seeing not just a desperate husband, but a man who survived the kind of trauma that either breaks you or makes you capable of things most people can't imagine. Alexander says, "So you know what it's like to lose a parent to corruption. You know what it's like to watch good people die because bad people have power. And you survived. You've been surviving your whole life." Marcus nods, and there's a moment of understanding between them. Two men from completely different worlds connected by the shared experience of losing people they love to violence that should never have touched them. Alexander says, "Then you know that giving up the evidence won't save them. You know that men like Hendricks and Wayne don't honor deals when the witnesses are more valuable dead than alive. So what do we do?" And Marcus surprises himself with the steadiness of his voice when he answers. He says, "We don't give them the real evidence. We fake the exchange. We set a trap. We go in with fake documents and empty drives, and we use the meeting to locate Elena and Sophia. Then we get them out by force." Detective Santos immediately starts shaking her head, listing all the reasons this plan is suicidal. Hendricks and Wayne are professionals. They'll check the evidence before releasing the hostages. They'll have security, probably armed mercenaries or corrupt cops who won't hesitate to shoot. The factory where they want to meet will be controlled territory, set up to their advantage, with sight lines and escape routes planned in advance. Marcus going in alone is essentially walking into an execution. But Marcus cuts her off, and his voice has an edge to it now, a hardness that wasn't there before. He says, "I'm not suggesting we go in blind. You said you have people you trust, cops who've been waiting years to take down Chief Wayne. Alexander has private security, probably ex-military, people who know how to run tactical operations. We use the 2 hours Wayne gave us to set up our own positions around that factory. We plant GPS trackers on me and on the music box. We have sharpshooters in position. We go in with enough backup that when things go wrong, and they will go wrong, we have options." Santos considers this, and you can see her running through scenarios in her head, calculating odds, weighing risks. She says, "It's incredibly dangerous. If they detect any of our preparation, if they have counter-surveillance, if they spot our people positioning, they'll kill the hostages immediately. But if we do nothing, if we comply completely, Elena and Sophia die anyway. At least this way we're fighting back." Alexander is already on the phone mobilizing his resources, and Marcus is struck by how quickly a billionaire can make things happen when he's motivated. Within minutes, Alexander has a private security firm on the line, a company staffed by former Special Forces operators who've done this kind of work in war zones around the world. He has technology experts preparing GPS trackers small enough to hide in clothing seams and music box hinges. He has legal teams standing by to ensure that whatever happens tonight, there's a legal framework to protect the people who survive. Alexander looks at Marcus and says something that makes the younger man's throat tight. He says, "Catherine ran from home because I made her world unsafe. I was too focused on my business, too blind to my partner's corruption, too careless with my marriage. I failed as a father and as a husband. My daughter spent 28 years in hiding because I couldn't protect her when she needed me most. But now she has a daughter of her own, and that daughter has a father who actually knows how to protect his family. You've done in 7 years what I couldn't do in 17. You made Catherine feel safe enough to stay in one place. You gave her a reason to stop running. Whatever happens tonight, Marcus, you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. You've given me hope. You've shown me what real love looks like. And I'm going to make sure you get another chance to be the father I never was." Marcus and Alexander spend the next 90 minutes preparing for what both of them know might be a suicide mission. They review everything Santos's team has gathered about the abandoned factory where Wayne wants to meet. It's a former textile mill, closed for 15 years, for stories of empty floors and broken windows. Good sight lines for anyone positioned inside. Multiple exits. Easy to control, but also easy to surveil from outside. Alexander's security team drives past the location in unmarked vehicles, using thermal imaging to identify heat signatures inside the building. They count at least 6 people, maybe more, positioned throughout the structure in what looks like a professional security setup. Santos briefs her team. 5 detectives she's worked with for years, people who've shared her suspicions about Chief Wayne, who've been waiting for an opportunity like this. They'll position in buildings adjacent to the factory, dressed as civilians, armed with long-range rifles and recording equipment. Everything that happens tonight will be documented. Every word, every action, every crime committed will be captured for prosecution. If they survive, Hendricks and Wayne are going down. If they don't survive, at least the evidence will still exist to expose them. Marcus is fitted with a hidden camera in his jacket button, so small it's invisible unless you're looking for it. He has a GPS tracker sewn into the lining of his jeans. He has an earpiece connected to a secure radio frequency so Santos's team can communicate with him in real time. And he has the music box, which Alexander's people have carefully modified. The original documents are gone, replaced with convincing fakes that will hold up to casual inspection but won't survive detailed analysis. The USB drives have been switched for empty drives formatted to look legitimate but containing no actual files. If Wayne's people check the evidence immediately, they'll see file names and folder structures that look right. But if they try to open anything, they'll find nothing. It's a gamble, a huge gamble, because the moment Hendricks realizes he's been tricked, everyone in that factory is in danger. Marcus asks Alexander one more time if he should be the one to go, and Alexander refuses immediately. He says, "You've lost too much already. If someone's dying tonight, it won't be Sophia's grandfather. I've had 3 decades to make peace with death. You've got a lifetime ahead of you with your family. You're going because Catherine chose you, and that means you're the person she trusts most in this world. Honor that trust. Bring her home." The drive to the abandoned factory takes 20 minutes, and Marcus spends the entire time thinking about his daughter. He thinks about Sophia's first word, which was daddy. He thinks about teaching her to ride a bike, running beside her holding the seat until she was ready, and then letting go and watching her fly. He thinks about the way she climbs into bed between him and Elena on Sunday mornings, the 3 of them tangled together in warmth and safety and love. He thinks about the future he wants for her, college and career and a life where she never has to know what her mother survived or what her grandfather built or what her father is about to do. Marcus is terrified. He's not going to pretend otherwise. He's absolutely terrified in a way that makes his hands shake and his breathing shallow. But terror and paralysis are different things. His father taught him that. You can be scared and still move forward. You can acknowledge fear and still do what needs to be done. So Marcus drives toward the factory where his wife and daughter are being held, and he thinks about his father shielding him with a dying body, thinks about Victoria Cross gathering evidence that got her killed, thinks about Elena living as someone else for 28 years to protect the truth. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward despite fear because something matters more than your own safety. But while all of this preparation is happening, while Marcus and Alexander and Detective Santos are planning their rescue operation, something else is happening in that warehouse where Elena and Sophia are being held. And we need to shift perspective now. Need to understand what's going on in Elena's mind because she's not just sitting there waiting to be rescued. Elena has been preparing for something like this for 28 years. She's run scenarios in her head countless times, imagining what she'd do if her past caught up with her, if the people who killed her mother found her, if she had to choose between her own life and protecting someone she loved. And now that moment has arrived, and Elena knows exactly what she needs to do. She's sitting in that metal chair with Sophia beside her, and she's looking around the warehouse cataloging details the way her father taught her when she was young, back when Alexander would take her to construction sites and show her how to assess structural integrity, how to identify exits, how to understand spatial relationships. Old habits from a childhood she left behind, but they're still there, still useful. Elena whispers to Sophia when the guards aren't paying close attention, her voice so quiet only her daughter can hear. She says, "Baby, when Mommy gives you a signal, you need to run to that red door over there. You see it, the one with the exit sign above it. You run as fast as you can, and you don't look back. You don't wait for Mommy. You just run." Sophia starts crying immediately, tears streaming down her 6-year-old face because she understands that Mommy is saying goodbye. Sophia whispers back, "I won't leave you. I won't. You said we always stay together." And Elena's heart is breaking because her daughter is right. They did promise to always stay together. But sometimes love means breaking promises to keep people safe. Elena pulls Sophia close, holding her tight, and she says, "There are things about Mommy you don't understand. Things I haven't told you because I wanted you to have a normal childhood, a happy life. But you need to know something, baby. You have a grandfather. His name is Alexander Cross, and he's a good man who's going to love you so much. If something happens to me tonight, you'll be okay. He'll take care of you. Daddy will take care of you. You're going to have a beautiful life, and I need you to promise me you'll run when I tell you to run. Promise me, Sophia." And Sophia, crying so hard she can barely breathe, whispers, "I promise, Mommy. I promise." Marcus is about to walk into a death trap to save his family, and Elena is preparing to sacrifice herself for her daughter. Meanwhile, you're over there still deciding if subscribing to Olivia the Storyteller is too much of a commitment. Think about that for a second. We're at the climax of a story about parents willing to die for their children, about love that's stronger than fear, about ordinary people facing extraordinary evil. And some of you are watching this entire saga unfold without bothering to click the subscribe button. Go ahead, tell me in the comments why you're allergic to subscribing while a 6-year-old might lose both parents tonight. Explain to me what's stopping you from supporting a storyteller who's crafted this emotional journey for you. I'll wait. Actually, no, I won't, because Marcus is about to arrive at that factory, and what happens next is going to determine whether this family survives or whether Hendrix wins and buries the truth for another 20 years. Comment right now with what you think is going to happen. Does Marcus's plan work? Does Elena's sacrifice save Sophia? Or does everything go wrong in ways no one anticipated? Let's finish the story together, because the next chapter is the confrontation we've been building toward, and I promise you, it's not going to go the way you expect. Marcus pulls up to the abandoned textile factory at exactly the time Chief Wayne specified, and the building looks like something from a nightmare. All broken windows and crumbling brick, the kind of place where bad things happen and no one hears you scream. The sun is setting behind the structure, casting long shadows that make the whole scene feel like it's already drenched in violence. Marcus can see his hands shaking on the steering wheel, can feel his heart hammering so hard he thinks it might burst through his chest, but he forces himself to breathe, slowly the way his father taught him. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Fear is information, not instruction. You acknowledge it, and then you move anyway. He picks up the music box from the passenger seat, feeling the weight of it, knowing it contains fake evidence that won't fool anyone for long, knowing that the moment Hendrix realizes he's been tricked, everything goes to hell. But Marcus also knows that Detective Santos has 5 sharpshooters positioned in buildings around the factory, that Alexander's security team is standing by ready to breach, that every word spoken inside is going to be recorded and transmitted to federal prosecutors in real time. They have a plan. It's a dangerous plan, a desperate plan, but it's the only chance they have. Marcus walks through the factory entrance, and the inside is worse than the outside. The floor is littered with debris and broken glass, old machinery rusting in corners, graffiti covering walls that haven't seen legitimate business in over a decade. The air smells like mold and motor oil and fear. And standing in the center of the main floor, lit by industrial work lights someone set up specifically for this meeting, is Senator Richard Hendrix himself. Marcus recognizes him from news coverage and campaign posters, the silver-haired statesman with the confident smile and the expensive suit, but seeing him in person is different. This isn't the polished politician who appears on television talking about family values and law and order. This is a man who's killed to protect his secrets, who's corrupted an entire city's police force, who spent 28 years covering up murder and embezzlement. Hendrix is flanked by Chief of Police Thomas Wayne, who's wearing his uniform like a costume, the badge on his chest a mockery of everything it's supposed to represent. And around them are 4 armed men, professional operatives with the kind of military bearing that says they've done this work before, that they're comfortable with violence, that they won't hesitate to follow orders no matter how dark those orders become. Marcus's eyes search the massive space and find what he's looking for. 50 yards away, in a corner lit by another work light, Elena and Sophia are sitting in metal chairs. They're not tied, but they might as well be with 4 guns trained in their direction. Elena looks exactly like she did this morning when she kissed Marcus goodbye before her shift, except now there's something different in her eyes. Not fear exactly, though that's there too. Something harder, something determined. She's wearing her nurse's scrubs still, And Marcus thinks about how she left their apartment thinking it was just another day, thinking she'd work her shift and come home to him and Sophia and their normal life. But there is no normal anymore. There's only this moment, this confrontation, this choice between truth and survival. Sophia sees Marcus and starts to cry out, but Elena puts a hand on her shoulder and the little girl goes quiet, trusting her mother in a way that makes Marcus's chest ache. Elena has been preparing Sophia for something, teaching her how to survive what's about to happen, and Marcus realizes his wife has never stopped being Catherine Cross. She's never stopped being the girl who survived a fire that killed her mother, who spent 28 years waiting for this confrontation. Hendrik speaks first, and his voice is smooth and controlled, the practiced tone of a man who's used to commanding rooms and convincing people to trust him. He says, "Mr. Rivera, I appreciate your cooperation. This situation has been unfortunate for everyone involved, but I believe we can resolve it efficiently. Your wife has cost me nearly 3 decades of paranoia, nearly 30 years of looking over my shoulder wondering if the past would catch up. And now it has. So tonight, we close this chapter once and for all. You give me what I want, I give you back your family, and we all move on with our lives. Simple. Clean. Mutually beneficial." But Marcus doesn't trust a word of it, can hear the lie underneath the polished delivery, can see in Hendrix's eyes that there's no scenario where anyone in this factory survives except the senator and his people. Marcus stalls, needing to buy time for Santos's team to position properly, needing to keep Hendrix talking long enough for the recording equipment to capture everything. He says, "I need to see my daughter first. I need proof she's okay. Let me talk to her. Let me see that you haven't hurt them. Prove you're negotiating in good faith." Hendrix smiles like this is a reasonable request, and he gestures to one of his operatives who walks Marcus closer to where Elena and Sophia are sitting. Not close enough to touch them, not close enough to make a rescue attempt, but close enough that Marcus can see Sophia's tear-stained face and Elena's steady gaze. Marcus wants to run to them, wants to scoop his daughter into his arms and shield his wife with his body, but he forces himself to stay calm, to play his role. He says, "Sophia, baby, are you okay? Has anyone hurt you?" And Sophia shakes her head, crying but trying to be brave, and she says, "Mommy said you'd come. Mommy said you always keep your promises." Marcus feels something break inside him because he doesn't know if he can keep this promise, doesn't know if any of them are getting out of here alive. He looks at Elena, and she looks back with an expression that says, "I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for the lies. I'm sorry you're in danger because of choices I made when I was 17. But Marcus shakes his head slightly, trying to communicate that he understands, that he doesn't blame her, that he'd walk into this factory 100 times if it meant a chance to save his family. Hendrix decides it's time to monologue, because that's what powerful men do when they think they've won. They explain. They justify. They confess to people they're about to kill because they need someone to understand how clever they've been, how much they've gotten away with. He starts talking, and Marcus recognizes this for what it is, the classic antagonist mistake of revealing everything right before the heroes are supposed to die. But Hendrix doesn't realize he's being recorded, doesn't know that every word is being transmitted to federal prosecutors, doesn't understand that his confession is going to be his downfall. Hendrix says, "I did order the fire. I want you to understand that. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. Victoria Cross discovered my embezzlement scheme, and she was going to report me that week. I'd spent 5 years carefully stealing from Alexander's company, building my own fortune from his success, and I couldn't let some self-righteous housewife destroy everything I'd built. So yes, I hired professionals to burn the mansion down. The plan was simple. Kill Victoria before she could expose me. Kill Alexander, so there'd be no one to pursue justice. Kill Catherine, so there'd be no heir to claim the company or ask uncomfortable questions. Make it look like an electrical fire, or maybe teenage rebellion. Pay off the investigators to ensure the case got closed quickly. Move on." He continues, pacing now like he's giving a speech, and Chief Wayne watches him with an expression that's unreadable. Hendrix says, "Alexander refused my buyout offer because he'd started to suspect something was wrong with the finances. He was too proud, too stubborn, too convinced he could control everything in his little empire. So he had to go. But the arsonists I hired made a mistake. They set the fire while Alexander was in the guest house, separated from the main building because of his affair. He survived. And somehow, impossibly, Catherine survived too. I didn't know that for years. The DNA evidence said she was dead, the investigation was closed. Everything pointed to the Cross family being eliminated except for one grieving father who was too broken to ask questions. I used the money I'd stolen to build a political career. Went from business executive to state legislature to the Senate. And all the while, Chief Wayne here has protected me. Every time someone asked questions about the Cross fire, Wayne shut them down. Every time an investigation got too close to the truth, Wayne buried it. He's been my insurance policy for 28 years. Marcus is listening to all of this being recorded, knowing federal prosecutors are hearing every word, knowing this confession is ironclad evidence that will send Hendricks to prison for life. But he's also calculating distances, counting guards, looking for opportunities to act when the time comes. And then Elena does something that surprises everyone in that factory. She speaks up. Her voice is steady despite the terror she must be feeling. Steady in a way that says she's been preparing for this moment for 28 years, and she's not backing down now. She says, "You think you're so clever, Senator. You think you've controlled the situation for 3 decades. But you've made assumptions that are going to cost you everything." Hendricks turns to her, annoyed at being interrupted, and he says, "What assumptions would those be, Catherine?" And Elena smiles, and there's something in that smile that's cold and satisfied and absolutely terrifying. She says, "You assumed that music box was the only evidence my mother gathered. You assumed I spent 28 years hiding and running and being afraid. But you're wrong." Elena continues, and Marcus can hear the strength in her voice, the intelligence that's been hidden behind years of playing the simple nurse, the strategic mind that's been planning this confrontation since she was 17 years old. She says, "I've been gathering new evidence for years. Every political bribe you've made since 1997. Every corrupt deal you've cut, every person you've paid off or threatened. I became a nurse specifically so I could treat police officers, so I could hear their conversations, so I could gather names and dates and recordings of things they said when they thought no one was listening. I married a good man and lived in a tiny apartment and worked night shifts, and everyone thought I was just surviving, just getting by. But my simple life was cover for a long-game investigation. I've documented everything, Senator. Bank records, email trails, recorded conversations, testimonies from people you thought were loyal. The music box my husband is carrying, that's just my mother's evidence from 1997. Important, certainly. Enough to convict you of murder and arson. But I've spent 28 years building a case that goes so much deeper. Corruption charges that span 3 decades. Connections to organized crime. Evidence of murders you've committed or ordered since then. You think tonight closes this chapter? Tonight opens it wider than you've ever imagined." Hendricks' confident expression cracks, and Marcus watches realization dawn on the senator's face. The music box was bait. Catherine, or Elena, or whoever she is, has been playing the longest con imaginable. She let everyone think she was running and hiding when really she was hunting, gathering evidence, building a case that would ensure Hendricks could never escape justice. Marcus feels a surge of pride in his wife, this woman who's been carrying this burden alone for so long, who's been smarter and braver than anyone gave her credit for. Hendricks turns to Chief Wayne and snarls, "You said she was just a nurse. You said she'd been living quietly. You said she wasn't a threat." And Wayne's expression is strange, something Marcus can't quite read, and the chief says, "I said I was monitoring her. I never said she wasn't dangerous." And that's when everything happens at once. Detective Santos's voice comes through Marcus's earpiece saying, "Go, go, go," and suddenly there are breaching charges blowing open doors at multiple entry points around the factory. Santos and her team pour in from the east entrance, wearing tactical gear and carrying automatic weapons. Alexander's private security team breaches from the west, professional operators moving with military precision. Hendricks' guards start shooting immediately, the warehouse erupting with the sound of gunfire that echoes off concrete walls and makes Marcus's ears ring. Chief Wayne turns to shoot Elena, his gun rising in what seems like slow motion, and Marcus reacts on pure instinct. He tackles the chief of police, using techniques his father taught him, driving his shoulder into Wayne's midsection and taking him to the ground hard enough to knock the wind out of him. They struggle for the gun, rolling across broken glass and debris, and Marcus is fighting for his life against a man who's 30 pounds heavier and trained in combat. But Marcus has something Wayne doesn't. Marcus has everything to lose. He has a wife and daughter who need him to survive this. So Marcus fights with desperation and violence he didn't know he was capable of, slamming Wayne's gun hand against the concrete floor until the weapon skitters away. The firefight is chaos. Hendrix's operatives are professionals, taking cover behind old machinery and returning fire with precision that speaks to military training. But they're outnumbered and outmaneuvered because Santos's team has been planning this operation for hours, knows the building layout, has established fields of fire that limit the enemy's options. Marcus sees Elena somehow free from her chair, sees her pull Sophia toward the red door she'd identified earlier, sees his wife protecting their daughter with her own body while navigating through a war zone. Sophia is crying and terrified but moving fast, and Marcus thinks run, baby girl, run as fast as you can. One of Hendrix's guards tries to intercept them, but Elena does something Marcus has never seen her do. She fights. His gentle wife who treats wounds and cares for the sick drops low and sweeps the guard's legs, using leverage and technique that says she's had training he didn't know about. The guard goes down hard, and Elena scoops up Sophia and runs for that red door while bullets ricochet off walls around them. Alexander's security team reaches Sophia first, two massive men in tactical gear who shield the little girl with their bodies and evacuate her through the red door to a waiting vehicle outside. Marcus sees his daughter disappear to safety, and the relief is so overwhelming he almost loses focus on the fight. But Chief Wayne is getting up, reaching for a backup weapon, and Marcus has to keep moving. He tackles Wayne again, and they're grappling hand-to-hand, trading punches that land with brutal impact. Marcus takes a hit to the ribs that makes his vision blur, but he returns with an elbow strike to Wayne's jaw that sends the corrupt cop sprawling. Santos's team is shouting clear as they secure sections of the warehouse, taking down Hendrix's operatives with professional efficiency. Marcus sees Detective Santos herself advancing on Hendrix, her weapon trained on the senator, and she's shouting, "Drop your weapon, get on the ground," but Hendrix isn't surrendering. He's backing toward a rear exit, his gun sweeping the room looking for a target, looking for a way to escape, or at least to hurt someone on his way down. Elena is back in the center of the warehouse, having delivered Sophia to safety, and now she's doing what nurses do. She's protecting witnesses. One of Hendrix's operatives is wounded and trying to reach a weapon, and Elena kicks it away before kneeling to apply pressure to his gunshot wound. Even in the middle of a firefight, even knowing this man was hired to kill her, she's saving his life because that's who she is. That's who Catherine Cross became. Not someone broken by tragedy, but someone strengthened by it. Someone who chose to heal instead of harm, who spent 28 years surviving and gathering evidence and preparing for this exact moment. Marcus watches her and thinks, this is the woman I married, this is the woman I love, and I'm going to make sure she survives this night. But then everything freezes. Chief Wayne, bleeding from his mouth where Marcus hit him, stands up and puts a gun to Marcus's head. The cold metal presses against Marcus's temple, and Wayne shouts, "Everyone stop or he dies." The room goes quiet except for ragged breathing and the ringing aftermath of gunfire. Santos's team has their weapons trained on Wayne, but they don't have a clean shot, not without risking Marcus. And across the warehouse, Hendrix has his gun pointed at Elena, and he's shouting the same thing. Everyone stops, or they both die. It's a Mexican standoff, the kind of impossible situation where nobody wins, where any action triggers a cascade of violence that leaves everyone dead. Marcus can feel his heartbeat pounding in his ears, can feel the pressure of the gun against his skull, can see Elena 20 feet away with Hendrix's weapon aimed at her chest. Their eyes meet across that space, and in that moment, Marcus understands everything. All the lies, all the secrets, all the years of hiding. Elena did what she had to do to survive, and in surviving, she found Marcus and built a life and created something good out of tragedy. Elena speaks, her voice carrying across the warehouse to reach Marcus, and she says, "I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you who I really was, but marrying you was the only true thing I ever did. 7 years of pretending to be Elena Rivera, and the only moments that felt real were the ones I spent with you." Marcus wants to tell her it's okay, that he understands, that he forgives everything, but Chief Wayne's gun is pressed so hard against his head he can barely think. So Marcus says the only thing that matters. He says, "I know who you are. Catherine Elizabeth Cross, daughter of Victoria and Alexander, survivor of the fire that was supposed to kill you, mother of my daughter, my wife. And I love you anyway. I love you because of who you are, not despite it. Every moment we had together was real to me. Every single one. And Hendrix makes a sound of disgust, this intimate moment happening in the middle of his downfall, and he's distracted. Just for a second. Just long enough that he takes his eyes off the people who are threatening him. And Detective Santos, who's been waiting 28 years for this shot, pulls her trigger. The bullet hits Hendrix in the shoulder, spinning him around, knocking the gun from his hand. He goes down hard, screaming in pain and rage, and Marcus thinks it's over. They've won. Justice is finally served. But then something happens that nobody expected. Chief Wayne drops his gun. Just drops it voluntarily, stepping back from Marcus with his hands up in surrender. He says, "I'm done. I've been wearing a wire for 2 hours. Federal prosecutors have everything I've said tonight, everything Hendrix has said, every confession, every admission, every detail of the conspiracy." Wayne looks at Detective Santos with an expression that's weary and maybe relieved, and he says, "You flipped me 3 days ago, Maria. You offered me a deal. Testimony against Hendrix in exchange for a reduced sentence. 20 years instead of life. A chance to see my grandchildren before I die. And I took it. I've been working with federal prosecutors, gathering evidence, recording conversations. Tonight was the final piece. Hendrix just confessed to everything on tape, and I'm done protecting him. I'm done being his insurance policy. Arrest me. I'll testify. Put me in prison. But at least I won't die as the man who let a murderer become a senator." Marcus is reeling from this revelation, trying to process that Chief Wayne was working with him all along, that Santos played a longer game than anyone realized. But there's no time to celebrate because Hendrix isn't done. The senator is wounded but not fatally, and he's reaching for the gun he dropped, his face twisted with rage and the knowledge that everything is over, that his political career is destroyed, that he's going to prison for the rest of his life. He gets the gun in his hand, and he's raising it with the kind of desperate violence that comes from having nothing left to lose. He aims at Elena, and Marcus sees it happening in slow motion. Hendrix is going to shoot her. He's going to take Catherine Cross with him into hell, going to finish what he started 28 years ago. Marcus doesn't think. He just moves. He throws himself between his wife and the gun, shielding Elena with his own body the way his father shielded him all those years ago in Mexico. The way good men do when they love someone more than they love their own life. The gunshot is deafening. Marcus feels impact like being hit by a sledgehammer, feels pain explode through his chest, feels his legs give out as he collapses. He hears Elena screaming his name. He hears Santos shouting officer down. He hears Hendrix laughing, a bitter, desperate sound. And Marcus thinks about his daughter safe in Alexander's car, thinks about his wife alive because he chose to stand in front of her, thinks about his father smiling somewhere and saying, "You did good, Mijo. You protected your family." The warehouse is spinning, and Marcus's vision is darkening, but he can see Elena's face above him, can feel her hands pressing on his chest trying to stop the bleeding. She's crying and working and saying, "Stay with me, Marcus. Don't you dare leave me. I just got you back. We just survived this." And Marcus wants to tell her it's okay, that Sophia needs her more than she needs him, that he'd take this bullet 1,000 times if it meant his family survived. But he can't form the words. The darkness is closing in. And the last thing Marcus hears before everything goes black is Elena's voice saying, "I love you. I love you. Stay with me." Marcus just took a bullet for a woman who lied about her identity for 7 years. That's devotion. That's the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions, that doesn't require complete honesty to be real. He loved Elena knowing she had secrets. He loves Catherine knowing who she really is. And he was willing to die to protect her. But you can't even click subscribe for Olivia the Storyteller after watching this entire saga unfold. Make it make sense. We've gone from a poor husband asking a simple question to a conspiracy that goes back 3 decades to a firefight in a warehouse to a man taking a bullet for his family, and some of you still haven't subscribed. Drop a comment right now, defending your lack of commitment. Tell me why you can watch Marcus sacrifice himself, but can't support the storyteller who created this journey. Meanwhile, we need to find out if Marcus survives. We need to know if Elena finally gets justice for her mother. We need to see whether Hendrix faces consequences, or whether corruption wins. Subscribe to Olivia the Storyteller right now if you want to see how this ends, because the next chapter is going to answer every question and resolve every thread, and you need to be here for it. Marcus Rivera wakes up in a hospital room 3 hours after being shot, and the first thing he sees is Elena's face hovering above him like an angel or a ghost, or maybe both. She's still wearing her nurse's scrubs from the warehouse, but now they're covered in his blood, dark stains that spread across the blue fabric like evidence of how close he came to dying. Her eyes are red from crying, her face streaked with tears and dust and gunpowder residue, and she's holding his hand so tightly he can feel her pulse through her fingertips. When she realizes he's awake, she makes a sound that's half sob and half laugh, and she presses her forehead against his and whispers, "Thank God, thank God, thank God," like a prayer she's been repeating for hours. Marcus tries to speak, but his throat is dry and his chest hurts like someone drove a truck over it, which isn't far from the truth. The bullet hit him in the shoulder, the doctors will tell him later. It missed his heart by 3 inches, missed his lung by 2, punched through muscle and scraped against bone but didn't hit anything vital. He's going to need surgery to repair the damage, weeks of physical therapy to regain full range of motion, and he'll carry a scar for the rest of his life. But he's alive. He took a bullet meant for his wife, and he survived, and that's all that matters. Elena refuses to leave the waiting room during Marcus's surgery, even though hospital staff tells her she needs to get cleaned up, needs to give a statement to police, needs to be checked for injuries herself. She plants herself in a plastic chair and says she's not moving until she knows Marcus is okay, and something in her voice makes everyone back off. This is Catherine Cross, survivor of a fire that killed her mother, woman who spent 28 years hiding from a senator who tried to murder her entire family, and she's not going anywhere until the man who saved her life comes out of surgery alive. Detective Santos sits with her, still in her tactical gear, and Alexander Cross arrives within 30 minutes, bringing Sophia with him. The little girl has been checked by paramedics and cleared physically, but emotionally she's traumatized in ways that will take years to process. She runs to her mother and climbs into her lap, and Elena holds her so tightly it's like she's trying to absorb Sophia back into her body, trying to undo the separation that nearly cost them everything. Sophia keeps asking where Daddy is, why there's blood on Mommy's clothes, what happened in that scary building with all the loud noises. Elena tells her Daddy is getting medicine from the doctors, that he's going to be fine, that everything is okay now, and she's lying because she doesn't know if Marcus is going to be fine, doesn't know if the bullet damaged something the paramedics couldn't see, doesn't know if she's about to become a widow and make her daughter fatherless because of secrets she should have shared years ago. Alexander Cross stands awkwardly at the edge of this reunion, not sure how to insert himself into his daughter's life after 28 years of absence. He's wearing an expensive suit that's now rumpled and dirty from the warehouse operation, and he looks older than his 60 years, worn down by decades of grief that's only now being replaced by the overwhelming reality that his daughter is alive. Sophia notices him first, this tall silver-haired man who's been hovering near her mother, and she asks in that direct way 6-year-olds have, "Who are you?" Elena looks up at her father, and there's a moment of silence that carries the weight of everything unspoken between them. Elena says, "Baby, this is Alexander Cross. He's my daddy, which makes him your grandfather." Sophia's eyes go wide because she's never had a grandfather before, never had extended family of any kind, and she looks at Alexander with curiosity and a little fear. She says, "Are you really my grandfather?" And Alexander, this billionaire who commands boardrooms and closes deals worth millions, drops to one knee, so he's at eye level with his granddaughter, and says, "Yes, sweetheart. Yes, I'm really your grandfather, and I'm never losing you again. I'm never going to let anything bad happen to you. I promise." Sophia studies him for a long moment, and then she says, "Mommy has your picture. She keeps it hidden in her music box. I saw it once when I wasn't supposed to be looking." And Alexander's face crumples because Catherine has been carrying his photograph for 28 years, keeping him close even though she couldn't contact him, holding on to the family she lost. The surgeon emerges 4 hours after Marcus was wheeled into the operating room, and she's a middle-aged woman with the kind of calm competence that comes from saving lives every day. She tells Elena that Marcus is stable, that the surgery was successful, that he's going to make a full recovery with time and rest. The bullet pierced his shoulder, but the damage was reparable, no permanent loss of function expected, no complications from blood loss or infection. He's strong, the surgeon says. He's a fighter. He's going to be fine. Elena breaks down completely, sobbing with relief, so intense it shakes her entire body, and Alexander puts an awkward arm around her shoulder because he doesn't know how else to comfort a daughter he hasn't touched in 3 decades. Sophia is crying too, because Mommy is crying and 6-year-olds absorb their parents' emotions like sponges, and Detective Santos watches this reunion with an expression of satisfaction because she's been waiting 20 years to see justice served and a family reunited and the good guys finally winning. While Marcus is in recovery, the world outside the hospital is exploding with the news that's going to dominate headlines for months. Senator Richard Hendricks is in custody at a federal holding facility, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for Victoria and Catherine Cross, arson, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, corruption, embezzlement, and about 15 other felonies that prosecutors are still cataloging. His shoulder wound has been treated, and now he's sitting in an interrogation room facing federal prosecutors who have 28 years of evidence against him, including his own recorded confession from the warehouse. His political career is over. His presidential ambitions are ashes. His legacy is going to be defined by the murders he committed and the corruption he embodied. Chief Thomas Wayne is in a separate facility, cooperating fully with prosecutors in exchange for the reduced sentence Detective Santos negotiated. He's providing testimony about every corrupt act he committed over 20 years, every investigation he buried, every officer he corrupted, every time he protected Hendricks from justice. Wayne's cooperation is triggering a cascade of arrests throughout the city's police department and political establishment. Dozens of officials who were part of Hendricks's network are being taken into custody, their careers ending in handcuffs and perp walks, their corruption finally exposed. The news media is having a field day with a story that is everything. Billionaire's daughter, presumed dead for 28 years, is actually alive and working as a nurse under a false identity. Senator with presidential ambitions is actually a murderer who killed to cover up embezzlement. Corrupt police chief protected him for 3 decades. Working-class hero husband takes a bullet to save his wife. It's the kind of story that would seem too dramatic for fiction, but it's real, and every news outlet in the country is covering it nonstop. The headline that dominates is Billionaire's daughter alive after 28 years, Senator charged with mother's murder. There are photographs of Catherine Cross from 1997 next to recent photos of Elena Rivera showing the same face aged by time and hardship. There are interviews with people who knew the Cross family, who remember the fire, who expressed shock that Catherine survived. There are legal experts analyzing the case, talking about the strength of the evidence, predicting that Hendricks will spend the rest of his life in prison. And through it all, Alexander Cross's public relations team is managing the narrative, ensuring that Catherine is portrayed as a survivor and hero rather than someone who faked her death and lived under false pretenses. Marcus is moved to a private room that Alexander pays for, and when he's finally conscious and stable enough to have visitors, Elena sits beside his bed and tells him everything. She tells him about the night in 1997 when she was 17 and rebellious and in love with a boy her father didn't approve of. She tells him about sneaking out to meet that boyfriend, climbing down the trellis outside her window, walking to the park where they'd sit and talk about running away together and building a life free from her father's expectations. She tells him about coming home at 4 a.m. to find her house on fire, seeing flames consuming the 2nd floor where her mother slept, hearing her father screaming in the distance, but not being able to reach him through the inferno. And she tells him about seeing Richard Hendricks running from the property, recognizing him because he'd been at family dinners and company parties, understanding immediately that this wasn't an accident but murder. Catherine was 17 and terrified and smart enough to know that if Hendricks realized she'd survived and witnessed him at the scene, she'd be next on his kill list. So she ran. Not to her father, not to the police, not to any of the obvious places a scared teenager would go. She ran to the garden shed at the edge of the property where she'd hidden her music box days earlier after her mother gave her that letter and told her if anything happens to me, this is important. Catherine grabbed the music box, and she disappeared into the city, using cash from babysitting to buy food and hide in places where no one would look for a privileged 17-year-old. She spent 3 terrified days moving from homeless shelter to bus station to all-night diner, trying to figure out what to do, knowing she couldn't go home because home didn't exist anymore. And then she met Officer James Mitchell, Santos's partner, the good cop who noticed a scared teenager trying to hide in a shelter and asked if she needed help. Catherine told him everything. She showed him the music box and her mother's evidence. She explained that she'd witnessed Hendricks fleeing the fire. And Mitchell, understanding that the corruption went too deep to fight through official channels, made a decision that saved her life. He helped her disappear completely. Mitchell used his connections to create a new identity for Catherine Cross, giving her the name Elena Rivera and documents that would hold up under casual scrutiny but wouldn't survive deep investigation. He planted fake DNA evidence that confirmed Catherine had died in the fire, using samples he collected from her room before the scene was fully processed. He told Alexander Cross that his daughter was definitively dead, that he should try to find peace, and every word was a lie told to protect Catherine from people who wanted her dead. Mitchell gave Catherine money from his own savings, gave her advice on how to stay hidden, told her to move frequently and never get too comfortable anywhere, to avoid cameras and government databases and anything that might trigger recognition software or background checks. And then he told her to live, to survive, to wait for the day when it would be safe to come forward with the truth. Catherine spent the next 21 years doing exactly that. She moved from city to city, never staying anywhere longer than 2 years, working jobs that paid cash under the table or used her false identity. She educated herself through community colleges and online courses, eventually getting legitimate nursing credentials through an accelerated program that didn't dig too deeply into her background. She became a nurse because it was a way to help people, a way to honor her mother's kindness and make meaning from tragedy. She moved every few years, always watching over her shoulder, always prepared to run if Hendricks or his people got too close. She gathered new evidence during those years, documenting every corrupt deal Hendricks made as he rose from business executive to politician to senator. She treated police officers and listened to their conversations, recorded things they said when they thought no one was paying attention. She built a case that supplemented her mother's original evidence, ensuring that when the time came to expose Hendricks, the prosecution would be ironclad. And then 7 years ago, Catherine met Marcus. She was working nights at City General Hospital, moving through life with the kind of emotional numbness that comes from decades of survival mode, and this construction worker brought her coffee and asked about her day like she was a person who mattered instead of invisible maintenance staff. For the first time in 21 years, Catherine felt safe enough to stop running. She felt safe enough to stay in one place, to build a life, to let someone get close to her. She knew it was dangerous. She knew she was breaking every rule Mitchell had given her about staying isolated and avoiding connections. But Marcus made her want to be human again instead of just surviving. So she stayed. She married him knowing she was lying about her identity, knowing she was putting him at risk, knowing that if her past caught up with her it would destroy the life they'd built. But she stayed because for the first time since she was 17, Catherine Cross felt like she could breathe. Marcus listens to all of this from his hospital bed, and when Elena finishes talking, there's a long silence where he processes everything she's told him. Finally, he says 7 years of lies. 7 years of waking up next to someone who wasn't who she said she was. 7 years of building a life on a foundation that was fake. His voice isn't angry exactly, but there's hurt in it, the kind of pain that comes from realizing someone you love has been keeping secrets. Elena is crying now, tears streaming down her face, as she says 7 years of the only real peace I've ever known. 7 years of feeling like I could be myself, even though I had to hide my name. Everything else was real, Marcus. My love for you was real. Our marriage was real. Sophia was real. The only lie was my name and my past. Everything we built together, that was all true. Marcus says you could have told me when we got serious. You could have trusted me with the truth. And Elena shakes her head, her voice breaking as she says, would you have believed me? If I told you on our third date that I was actually a dead billionaire's daughter hiding from a senator who tried to kill me, would you have stayed? Or would you have thought I was insane? Would you have called the police and triggered exactly the investigation that would have gotten us both killed? Marcus doesn't have an answer for that because she's right. If Elena had told him the truth early in their relationship, he probably would have thought she was delusional or dangerous. He might have walked away. He definitely wouldn't have believed her without proof. And if he'd gone to the police with her story, they would have alerted Chief Wayne, who would have alerted Hendricks, and both Marcus and Catherine would have ended up dead in some staged accident before the truth could come out. Marcus realizes something as they talk. Elena protected him by keeping him ignorant. If he'd known who she really was, if he'd known about Hendrix and the conspiracy and the danger she was in, Marcus would have tried to help. He would have pushed her to go to the authorities, to expose the corruption, to claim her inheritance and her real name. And that impulse to help, that instinct to fix things, would have gotten them both killed. Elena kept him safe by lying to him, kept their daughter safe by staying dead, kept the evidence secure by pretending it didn't exist. It was the only way to survive until the moment was right to expose Hendrix. Marcus looks at his wife, this woman who's stronger and braver and smarter than he ever imagined, and he says, "I understand why you did it. I don't like it, and I wish you trusted me, but I understand. But no more secrets. From now on, we tell each other everything. No more lies, no more hiding, no more running. We face things together." And Elena nods, relief washing over her face, and she says, "No more running. For the first time since I was 17 years old, I can be myself. I can use my real name. I can see my father. I can let Sophia know her grandfather. I can stop looking over my shoulder waiting for the past to catch up. Catherine Elizabeth Cross can finally exist again. But there's still one more reunion that needs to happen, one more conversation that's been waiting 20 years. Alexander and Catherine sit together in a private room at the hospital, and for the first time since the night of the fire, they're alone as father and daughter. The years of grief and anger and misunderstanding pour out of both of them in a flood of words and tears and accusations that have been building for decades. Catherine says, "I thought you blamed me for Mom's death. I thought you'd be angry that I survived when she didn't. I thought you'd think the fire was my fault because we'd argue that night." Alexander looks at her with an expression of absolute devastation and says, "I blamed myself. I was having an affair. I was distracted by my business. I wasn't paying attention to my partner's corruption, or my wife's investigation, or my daughter's unhappiness. I failed both of you. I failed to protect your mother. I failed to keep you safe. The fire happened because of my mistakes, not yours." Catherine reaches into her bag and pulls out a letter, the one her mother wrote 5 days before she died, the one that's been kept in the music box for 20 years. She hands it to her father and says, "Mom knew about the affair. She knew, and she forgave you. Read what she wrote. Read her last words." Alexander takes the letter with trembling hands, and he reads Victoria's handwriting, saying, "If something happens to me, tell Alexander to first love him. Tell him it's not his fault. Tell him I forgive him for his mistakes, and I hope he can forgive me for mine. I knew about the affair, and I was hurt, but I understood. We were both struggling with the weight of the life we'd built. I should have talked to him instead of gathering evidence alone. I should have trusted him to help me expose Hendrix. But I was trying to protect him, and maybe that was my mistake. Tell Alexander that Catherine is strong, that she'll survive whatever comes, that she's the best thing we ever created together. Tell him to trust her. Tell him to let her make her own choices. Tell him that our daughter is going to be extraordinary." Alexander breaks down completely, crying in a way he hasn't allowed himself to cry in 20 years. He's sobbing like a child, and Catherine holds her father while he mourns the wife he lost and the daughter he thought was gone and the years they can never get back. They sit together for a long time, grieving Victoria as a family for the first time, sharing memories and regrets, and the kind of healing that can only come from finally telling the truth. Alexander tells Catherine about the years he spent searching for her, about the false leads and the hope that kept dying and being rekindled, about the portrait he commissioned and the conversations he had with it late at night when loneliness became unbearable. Catherine tells Alexander about the life she built as Elena, about Marcus and Sophia and the tiny apartment that became home, about the nursing shifts and the quiet investigation and the constant fear that her past would destroy her future. They talk until visiting hours are over and hospital staff gently reminds them that other patients need rest. As they're leaving, Catherine says something that makes Alexander stop in his tracks. She says, "You have a second chance now. Don't waste it. Sophia is 6 years old, and she needs a grandfather who's present and engaged and actually there for her. You couldn't save Mom. You couldn't protect me, but you can be there for Sophia. You can give her the childhood I never got to finish. You can show her what it means to have family who loves her unconditionally. Don't let her grow up thinking wealth is more important than presence, That business is more important than relationships. Be the grandfather I needed you to be as a father. And Alexander, understanding that this is both forgiveness and a challenge, promises that he will. 3 months pass. 3 months of Marcus recovering from his shoulder wound, of depositions and legal proceedings as federal prosecutors build their case against Hendricks, of media attention that Catherine handles with surprising grace, of family therapy sessions where Sophia processes the trauma of the warehouse and learns who her mother really is, of Alexander building a relationship with his granddaughter, of Elena slowly becoming Catherine again in the eyes of the world while staying Elena in the privacy of her heart. 3 months of transformation, of healing, of building something new from the ashes of what was destroyed. And then Marcus wakes up one morning in a bedroom he doesn't recognize. The ceiling is too high. The bed is too soft. The light coming through the windows is too bright, filtered through curtains that cost more than his monthly rent used to be. For a moment, Marcus feels panic rising in his chest because where is he? What happened? Did something go wrong again? Has Hendricks somehow escaped? Did the past catch up with them one more time? He sits up too quickly, and his shoulder protests with the sharp pain of healing tissue, and that's when Elena walks in carrying a tray with breakfast and coffee. She's wearing a silk robe that Catherine Cross would have worn but Elena Rivera could never afford, and she smiles at his confusion and says, "Good morning, sleepyhead. Welcome to our first morning in the guest house. Did you forget we moved in yesterday? Justice is served. Marcus survived. Elena can finally be Catherine again. But we're not done yet. There's one more chapter, and if you've made it this far without subscribing to Olivia the Storyteller, I genuinely want to know what it would take. What exactly are you waiting for? We've given you 9 chapters of emotional intensity, plot twists, conspiracy, shootouts, family reunion, and you still haven't clicked that button? Comment below with your excuse while we see where this family ends up and whether Marcus and Catherine's marriage survives the truth. Because the final chapter is going to show you what happens when a working-class construction worker and a billionaire's daughter try to build a life together, when old wealth meets new family, when justice is finally served but the scars remain. Subscribe right now to Olivia the Storyteller if you want to see how this story actually ends, because I promise you, the final chapter is going to tie together every thread and leave you satisfied in ways you're not expecting. Marcus stares at Elena, or Catherine, or whoever she is now, standing in the doorway of this unfamiliar bedroom wearing a silk robe and holding a breakfast tray like this is perfectly normal. And slowly, through the fog of sleep and confusion and painkillers for his healing shoulder, he remembers. They moved yesterday. They moved into the guest house on Alexander Cross's estate after 6 months of Alexander insisting they needed to stay somewhere safe while the trial proceeded, while media attention made their old apartment a circus of reporters and cameras, while they figured out what their new life was going to look like. The guest house, that's where he is. It's bigger than their entire apartment was, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens and a fountain that probably costs more than Marcus made in 5 years of construction work. Catherine sets the breakfast tray on the bedside table and sits on the edge of the bed, and she's smiling, but there's uncertainty in her eyes like she's not sure how Marcus is going to react to waking up in luxury he never asked for. Marcus takes the coffee she offers him and drinks it slowly, letting the caffeine clear his head while he processes this new reality. 6 months ago, he was a construction worker living in a cramped apartment, working double shifts to make rent, married to a woman he thought was Elena Rivera. Now he's living on a billionaire's estate. His wife is Catherine Cross, his daughter is an heiress, and his father-in-law is one of the most powerful men in the country. It's like he went asleep in one life and woke up in someone else's. Catherine watches him with that careful expression she gets when she's trying to read his mood, trying to figure out if he's angry or overwhelmed or regretting the choices that brought them here. She says we can leave any time you want. This was supposed to be temporary, just until things settled down. If you're uncomfortable, we can find our own place. We can go back to living the way we used to. But even as she says it, both of them know that's not really possible. They can't go back. The apartment they rented is surrounded by media. Catherine's face is on every news channel. Sophia needs security that Marcus can't provide on a construction worker's salary. And honestly, after everything they've been through, after bullets and conspiracies and nearly losing everything, maybe accepting help isn't weakness. Maybe it's just being smart. Marcus tells Catherine about the identity crisis he's been having, the one he's been trying to hide for 6 months but can't ignore anymore. He says, I married Elena Rivera. I fell in love with a woman who worked night shifts as a nurse, who lived in a tiny apartment, who understood what it meant to struggle because she was struggling too. We were equals. We were building something together from nothing, and that mattered to me. It meant we chose each other not because of what we had, but because of who we were. But now you're Catherine Cross. You're an heiress to a fortune I can't even comprehend. And I'm still just Marcus Rivera, construction worker from Mexico, who never finished college. So who am I to you now? Am I your husband, or am I some kind of charity case you're keeping around out of obligation? Catherine's face shows pain at this question, and she reaches for his hand, holding it between both of hers like she's trying to anchor him to reality. She says, I'm the same person, Marcus. Different name, same heart. The woman who brought you coffee at 2 a.m. in that hospital hallway 7 years ago, that was me. The woman who married you in that courthouse with no family present because she had no family to invite, that was me. The woman who gave birth to Sophia in that cramped apartment and cried because she finally had someone to love who was completely hers, that was me. Catherine Cross and Elena Rivera are the same person. I just have my real name back now. Money doesn't change who we are inside. It doesn't change the fact that I chose you when I had nothing and would choose you again now that I have everything. Marcus wants to believe her, but there's this working-class pride in him that's been there since his father died, this need to be the provider, to be the man who takes care of his family through his own labor and sacrifice. He says, but you're an heiress. You own more money than I'll make in 10 lifetimes. How am I supposed to provide for you and Sophia when you could buy anything you want without even thinking about the cost? Catherine's expression shifts, and she looks at him with something like frustration mixed with love. She says, and I'm a nurse. I work in an emergency room dealing with trauma and blood and people dying, and I make decent money, but not enough to be comfortable. Money doesn't define us, Marcus. It's not who we are. I spent 28 years living in poverty by choice because I valued survival over wealth. I could have claimed my inheritance years ago if I'd been willing to risk exposure, but I chose to keep working, keep struggling, keep living as Elena, because that life was real in ways my childhood never was. And Marcus processes this, understanding for the first time that Catherine didn't choose poverty as some kind of performance. She chose it because it was honest, because it was safe, because it let her be someone other than the girl whose mother was murdered and whose life was destroyed by corruption. Elena Rivera wasn't a lie exactly. She was who Catherine became when she decided to survive instead of being a victim. But Marcus still can't shake the feeling that he's inadequate somehow, that he can't provide for his family the way a man is supposed to. He admits this insecurity out loud, says, I can't give you the life your father can give you. I can't give Sophia the opportunities she'll have access to now. I'm just a construction worker, Catherine. I fix things with my hands. I don't know how to navigate this world of wealth and power, and people who've never worried about money. And that's when Catherine reveals something she's been planning for months, something she's been building while Marcus recovered from his gunshot wound and testified at Hendrix's trial, and tried to figure out who he was in this new reality. She says, I've been setting up a foundation in my mother's name, the Victoria Cross Memorial Foundation. It's going to help working families access health care and education and housing, all the things that people like us, people like we used to be, struggle to afford. And Marcus, I want you to run it with me. Marcus stares at her, not understanding at first. She continues, you understand what struggling families need because you've lived it. You know what it's like to work double shifts and still not have enough. You know what it's like to choose between medicine and rent, between food and car repairs. You know what it's like to have dreams you have to abandon because survival takes precedence. I can provide the money for the foundation, but you can provide the understanding. You can make sure we're actually helping people instead of just throwing money at problems we don't understand. This isn't charity, Marcus. This isn't me saving you. This is me asking you to help me do something meaningful with resources I never asked for. You taught me how to live with integrity. You taught me what it means to build something with your own hands. Let me learn from you how to actually help people instead of just having wealth I don't know what to do with. And Marcus feels something shift inside him, understanding that maybe his value isn't in how much money he makes, but in who he is and what he knows and the perspective he brings to problems most wealthy people never think about. The trial of Senator Richard Hendricks becomes the media sensation of the decade, dominating news coverage for weeks as prosecutors present evidence spanning 28 years of corruption. Marcus and Catherine both testify, sitting in that courtroom telling their stories to a jury that seemed shocked by every revelation. Catherine describes the night she witnessed Hendricks fleeing from the fire that killed her mother, describes 28 years of hiding and survival and gathering evidence. Marcus describes taking a bullet to protect his wife, describes the warehouse confrontation, and the conspiracy that went so deep it corrupted an entire city's police force. The evidence is overwhelming. Victoria's original documentation from 1997. Catherine's additional evidence gathered over decades. Chief Wayne's testimony describing every crime he committed or covered up on Hendricks's orders. The recorded confession from the warehouse where Hendricks admitted to murder and conspiracy. The jury deliberates for less than 4 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts. Hendricks is sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole, multiple consecutive sentences that ensure he'll die behind bars. His co-conspirators receive similar sentences, and the entire criminal network that protected him for nearly 3 decades comes crashing down. Detective Maria Santos is promoted to captain and given command of a new anti-corruption task force dedicated to rooting out the kind of systemic corruption that allowed Hendricks to operate for so long. She becomes a national figure, giving interviews about the importance of officers who refuse to look the other way, who keep investigating even when their superiors tell them to stop, who understand that justice delayed is still justice worth pursuing. Chief Thomas Wayne serves his reduced 15-year sentence in a federal facility, his cooperation having sealed Hendricks's conviction but not absolved him of his own crimes. He's 58 years old, which means he'll be 73 when he's released if he survives that long in prison. Some people say 15 years is too light for someone who protected a murderer for 3 decades, but Santos argues that without Wayne's testimony, Hendricks might have found a way to escape justice one more time. Sometimes you make deals with lesser devils to catch greater ones. Marcus watches Catherine in the months after the trial, and he notices something he's never seen before. She sleeps through the night. For 7 years of marriage, Elena would wake up 2 or 3 times every night, sitting up in bed breathing hard like she'd been running from something in her dreams. Marcus always assumed it was nursing stress, the kind of trauma that comes from working in emergency rooms where you see people die regularly. But now he understands those nightmares were about the fire, about her mother, about Hendricks, and the constant fear that he'd find her and finish what he started. Since the trial ended, since Hendricks was sentenced to life in prison, Catherine sleeps peacefully. She goes to bed and doesn't wake until morning, and Marcus lies beside her watching her breathe slowly and deeply, and he thinks this is what safety looks like. This is what it means to finally stop running after 28 years. His wife, his Catherine, finally has peace. But living in luxury, while adjusting to Catherine's real identity creates tensions Marcus didn't anticipate. They have a difficult conversation one evening after Sophia is asleep, sitting in the guest house living room that's bigger than their entire old apartment. Marcus says, "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be married to Catherine Cross. I married Elena Rivera, remember? The woman who understood what it meant to stretch a dollar, who'd come home from nursing shifts exhausted and we'd eat cheap takeout and watch movies on our laptop because we couldn't afford cable. I knew how to be that woman's husband. But Catherine Cross, the heiress, the woman who could buy a car without checking her bank account first? I don't know how to fit into that life." And Catherine looks at him with tears in her eyes, and she says, "I'm the same person. How many times do I have to say it? Different name, same heart, same woman you fell in love with. The money doesn't change me." Marcus shakes his head, trying to articulate something he's been feeling for months but couldn't put into words until now. He says, "But you're an heiress, Catherine. You could have anything you want. You could date someone from your own social class, someone who knows which fork to use at fancy dinners, someone who's comfortable with wealth. Why would you stay with a construction worker who doesn't fit in your world?" Catherine stands up, pacing now, and her voice rises with frustration. She says, "Because I'm not just an heiress, Marcus. I'm also a nurse. I work in an emergency room. I deal with trauma and blood and people who are dying. I get paid hourly wages like everyone else in that hospital. The fact that I have money in a bank account doesn't change the fact that I chose a profession helping people, that I chose a life of service over a life of luxury. Money doesn't define who we are unless we let it. And Marcus realizes she's right, but he's still struggling with his own pride, his own sense of inadequacy. He admits what's really bothering him, the fear he's been carrying since they moved to the estate. He says, I can't provide for you the way I'm supposed to. I can't give you the life you deserve. Your father can offer you and Sophia everything I never could. Security, education, opportunities one couldn't dream of affording. So what's my role here? Am I just the guy you married when you thought you were poor, and now you're stuck with me out of obligation? Catherine stops pacing and looks at him with an expression that's both exasperated and loving. She says, you're the man who took a bullet for me. You're the man who loved me when I had nothing and offered nothing but lies about my identity. You're the man who made me feel safe for the first time in 20 years. You're the father my daughter adores. You're my partner. And if you think I'm going to let your working-class pride destroy what we've built together, you don't know me at all. She tells him about the foundation she's been planning, and her voice gets passionate in a way Marcus rarely hears. She says, my mother believed in protecting people with less power. She died trying to expose corruption that hurt workers and families and ordinary people. I want to honor her by actually helping people, not just having wealth I don't deserve. The Victoria Cross Memorial Foundation is going to provide health care assistance to families who can't afford insurance. It's going to provide scholarships for kids whose parents can't pay for college. It's going to help families facing eviction or medical bankruptcy or all the crises that destroy people who don't have safety nets. And Marcus, I need you to help me run it. Not because you need saving, but because you understand what these families are going through. You've lived the struggles we're trying to address. You know what actually helps versus what sounds good but doesn't work. I can provide the money, but you can provide the wisdom. That's not charity. That's partnership. And Marcus feels tears forming in his eyes because she's offering him something he didn't know he needed. Purpose. A way to use his experiences and his understanding of struggle to help other people. A role that's meaningful beyond just being Catherine's husband or Alexander's son-in-law. Marcus says yes. He says he'll help run the foundation, that he'll use everything he learned from years of struggling to make sure they actually help people instead of just performing charity. And Catherine hugs him so tightly he can feel her heartbeat against his chest, and she whispers, thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for understanding that love doesn't change just because circumstances do. We're still the same people who fell in love in a hospital hallway 7 years ago. We've just been given resources to do more good in the world. Let's use them together. Meanwhile, Sophia is adjusting to her new life with the kind of resilience that children somehow possess, even when adults are falling apart. She's 6 years old, turning 7 soon, and she's processing trauma that would break most adults. Being kidnapped, watching her father get shot, learning her mother isn't who she said she was, discovering she's an heiress and has a grandfather she never knew existed. It should destroy a child, but Sophia is remarkably okay. She has nightmares sometimes, waking up crying about the warehouse and the bad men with guns. She's in therapy twice a week with a child psychologist who specializes in trauma. But mostly, she's just Sophia. She plays with new friends from the private school Alexander wanted to enroll her in, except Catherine insisted they keep her in public school because Sophia asked to stay with her old friends. She does her homework at the kitchen table in the guest house. She watches cartoons on Saturday mornings. She's teaching her grandfather Spanish words because Marcus speaks Spanish with her and Alexander wants to be included in their conversations. Sophia calls her grandfather Abuelo Alexander, and it's the most beautiful blend of cultures Marcus has ever heard. She took Alexander's formal, wealthy, very Anglo name and made it warm by adding the Spanish word for grandfather, making him part of her family in a way that honors both her mother's heritage and her father's. Alexander treasures this. He walks Sophia to school every single morning, this billionaire in expensive suits walking hand in hand with his 7-year-old granddaughter, and he tells her stories about her grandmother Victoria, about what her mother was like as a child, about the family history she's part of. Marcus watches them together and sees Alexander being the father he wasn't to Catherine, being present and engaged and actually there for this child in ways he failed to be for his own daughter. It's redemption of a kind. It's a second chance that not everyone gets. One evening, Sophia asks Marcus a question that makes his heart stop. They're reading bedtime stories in her new bedroom that's decorated with a mix of her old stuffed animals from the apartment and new furniture Alexander bought, trying to blend her old life with her new one. And Sophia looks up at Marcus with her big serious eyes and says, "Daddy, are you my real dad? Or is someone else my real dad now that we know Mommy's real name?" Marcus feels panic rising because this is the conversation he's been dreading, the moment when Sophia starts questioning whether their relationship is legitimate now that everything else has been revealed as more complicated than they thought. He sets down the book and pulls Sophia into his lap, and he says, "Baby, I'm your forever dad. That's more real than anything. I'm the dad who was there when you were born. I'm the dad who walked you to your first day of school. I'm the dad who taught you to ride a bike and kissed your scraped knees and read you bedtime stories every single night. Biology doesn't make you a parent. Love makes you a parent. Choice makes you a parent. And I choose you every single day. You're my daughter, and I'm your dad, and nothing that's happened changes that." Sophia hugs him tightly and whispers, "I love you, Daddy." And Marcus holds her and thinks about how some families are chosen rather than assigned, how sometimes the bonds we create matter more than the bonds we're born with. He's not Catherine's biological family, has no connection to the cross fortune except through marriage, but he's Sophia's father in every way that matters. That's more real than any amount of wealth or heritage. 6 months after the trial ends, the family gathers for the dedication of the Victoria Cross Memorial Foundation. It's a public event covered by media, attended by politicians and philanthropists and people who want to be seen supporting a good cause. But for Marcus and Catherine and Alexander and Sophia, it's something more personal. It's honoring Victoria's memory by finishing what she started. The foundation headquarters is in a renovated building downtown, accessible to the communities it's meant to serve, and there's a bronze plaque on the wall with Victoria's name and dates, and a quote from one of her letters. "In a just world, wealth serves those who have less rather than insulating those who have more." Catherine chose the quote, and Alexander cries when he sees it because it captures perfectly who his wife was, the value she died defending. A photographer takes a family photo that will end up in newspapers and magazines, but more importantly, will hang in Alexander's study next to Victoria's portrait. The photo shows Marcus and Catherine and Sophia and Alexander, all of them genuinely smiling, all of them finally looking like a family that survived hell and came out stronger. Catherine is wearing a professional dress, but she's holding Sophia's hand like she's afraid to let go. Marcus has his arm around Catherine's waist, and you can see the faded scar on his shoulder where the bullet hit. Alexander stands behind them with both hands on Sophia's shoulders like he's anchoring himself to the granddaughter he thought he'd never have. And Sophia is grinning that unself-conscious smile children have when they feel safe and loved. This photo will replace the memorial portrait of Catherine that Alexander commissioned when he thought she was dead. The old portrait showed grief and loss and what might have been. This new photo shows survival and resilience and what actually is. After the dedication ceremony, Catherine walks to the small memorial garden the foundation built in Victoria's honor. There's a bench with Victoria's name, surrounded by flowers she loved, and Catherine kneels and places fresh roses. She whispers, "I did it, Mom. I kept your evidence safe for 28 years. I brought down the man who killed you. I found a family. I survived. And I'm going to use the resources you and Dad built to help people the way you wanted to help people. I'm going to finish what you started." Marcus stands a few feet away, giving Catherine privacy for this conversation with her dead mother, and he sees her crying and smiling at the same time, grief and joy mixing together the way they do when healing finally happens after decades of pain. Later, Marcus drives past the foundation building and sees a billboard going up. It advertises the foundation's services, offering assistance to working families struggling with healthcare costs, education expenses, housing insecurity, all the crises that Marcus remembers from his own life. And prominently featured on the billboard is the Marcus Rivera Children's Fund, a program Catherine designed specifically to help kids whose parents are working multiple jobs and still can't afford childcare or tutoring or extracurricular activities. Catherine named it after him without asking, implementing an idea he'd mentioned casually about how hard it was for him to focus on school when he was young because he was always working to help his mother pay bills. She took his lived experience and turned it into policy, turn his pain into a program that's going to help thousands of children. Marcus pulls over and just stares at the billboard with his name on it in letters 6 feet tall, and he realizes something profound. He didn't marry a poor nurse who turned out to be a billionaire heiress. He married a survivor who chose love over wealth, who chose him over an empire, who spent 20 years planning how to use her mother's evidence to bring down corruption and help people. Catherine could have revealed her identity years ago, could have claimed her inheritance, and lived in luxury. But she chose to work as a nurse, to marry a construction worker, to live in a cramped apartment and build something real instead of something easy. She chose Marcus when she had nothing to offer him but herself, and she chooses him now when she has everything. That's not charity. That's not obligation. That's love. The next day, something arrives at the estate that changes everything one more time. A delivery for Catherine Cross, and the return address makes Alexander go pale because he recognizes the law firm. It's the attorneys who handle Victoria's estate, who've been managing certain aspects of the Cross family legal affairs for decades. The package contains a letter, and when Catherine opens it, she sees her mother's handwriting and nearly drops it in shock. The letter is dated October 10th, 1997, 5 days before Victoria died, and the envelope says to be delivered to Catherine Cross on her 45th birthday, or if she resurfaces before that date. Catherine is 44 years old right now. In 2 months, she'll turn 45. The attorneys have been holding this letter for 28 years, waiting for a birthday that they thought would never come because they thought Catherine was dead, but now she's alive and the letter has been released. Catherine's hands are shaking so badly she can barely hold the paper, and Marcus gently takes it from her and suggests they read it together. Alexander comes over, and Sophia senses something important is happening, and the four of them sit together in the estate living room while Marcus reads Victoria's final words out loud. The letter starts with Victoria explaining that she's been gathering evidence against Hendricks for months, that she knows she's in danger, that she's prepared for the possibility that she might not survive long enough to expose him. She details the evidence she's hidden in the music box, explains why she chose to document everything alone instead of involving Alexander or the police, admits that she might be making a mistake by not asking for help. She writes about her fear that Hendricks will discover her investigation before she can finish it, about contingency plans she's made to ensure the evidence survives, even if she doesn't. But then the letter shifts, and Victoria starts writing directly to her daughter with the kind of wisdom that only comes from facing your own mortality. She writes, "Catherine, if you're reading this, then I'm likely dead, and you survived. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm sorry you had to face something so terrible. I'm sorry you lost your mother. I'm sorry your childhood ended in fire and violence and loss. But if you survived, then you're stronger than you know. You're braver than you realize. You're capable of more than you can imagine. You got my evidence to the right people, or you hid it until it was safe to reveal. Either way, you did what I couldn't do. You survived long enough to finish what I started. I'm so proud of you, Catherine. I'm so proud of the woman you're going to become." Victoria continues, and her words make Catherine sob with grief and love and the ache of missing her mother for 28 years. She writes, "You don't owe me justice, sweetheart. If exposing Hendricks puts you in danger, then let it go. Let him get away with it if that's what it takes to keep you safe. You don't owe me revenge. You don't owe me anything except to live. Live the life I didn't get to finish. Fall in love. Build a career. Create art or raise children or travel the world or do whatever makes you happy. Make your own family, whatever that looks like. Love hard. Be happy. Choose joy over justice if you have to choose. Your father will want you to claim your inheritance, to take over the company, to be the heir he always planned for you to be. But you don't owe him that either. You get to decide who you become, Catherine. You get to choose your own life. And if that life includes exposing Hendricks and bringing down corruption, then do it because you want to, not because you think I need you to. I love you. I'm so sorry I won't be there to see the woman you become. But I know you're going to be extraordinary." The letter ends with Victoria's signature, and underneath, she's written a final line that makes everyone in the room cry. She writes, "Tell your father I love him. Tell him I forgive him. Tell him to let you go if that's what you need. Tell him that love means trusting people to make their own choices, even when those choices take them away from you. Tell him I'm proud of the man he became, even if he wasn't perfect. Tell him our daughter is the best thing we ever made together." Catherine's voice is breaking as Marcus reads these words, and she's crying so hard she can barely breathe, and Alexander is beside her sobbing openly, and Sophia crawls into her mother's lap, not understanding everything, but understanding that mommy needs to be held. They sit together like that for a long time, this family that was broken apart by violence and brought back together by love and survival and the courage to face truth. Marcus holds his wife while she cries, and he thinks about Victoria Cross, a woman he never met but whose impact on his life is immeasurable. She gave Catherine the evidence that saved her life. She gave Catherine permission to choose her own path instead of feeling obligated to claim an inheritance or pursue revenge. She gave Catherine the wisdom to understand that survival is victory, that living well is the best response to tragedy, that joy is not a betrayal of the dead but a celebration of still being alive. Marcus whispers to Catherine, "Your mother would be so proud of you. You did everything she asked for. You survived. You built a family. You chose love. You found joy. And you still brought down the man who killed her. You got justice and happiness. You don't have to choose." And Catherine cries harder because she needed to hear that, needed someone to tell her that it's okay to be happy even though her mother is dead, okay to enjoy her wealth even though it came from tragedy, okay to move forward instead of being frozen in the past. Alexander reads the letter again and again, and each time he breaks down at the part where Victoria says she loves him and forgives him. He says to Catherine, "Your mother was a better person than I deserved. I was having an affair. I was neglecting my family. I was so focused on building wealth that I forgot why wealth matters, which is to protect and provide for the people you love. And she still forgave me. She still believed in me. She still thought I could be a good father to you." Catherine puts her hand on her father's shoulder and says, "Mom was right. You're being a good father now. It took you 28 years, but you're finally being the man she believed you could be. You're here for Sophia in ways you weren't here for me. That's growth. That's redemption. That's enough." Sophia, who's been sitting quietly absorbing all of this, asks a question that comes from the pure clarity of childhood. She says if Grandma Victoria wanted Mommy to be happy, and Mommy is happy now, does that mean we did the right thing? And everyone stops and looks at the 7-year-old who's just articulated what took them months to understand. Catherine picks up her daughter and holds her close and says, "Yes, baby. Yes, we did the right thing. We survived. We found each other. We made a family. And now we're using the resources Grandma Victoria and Grandpa Alexander built to help other people." That's exactly what Grandma Victoria wanted. We're living the life she didn't get to finish. We're choosing joy. And that's not selfish. That's honoring her memory by refusing to let tragedy define us. The four of them go outside to the estate grounds, and at sunset, that golden hour when everything looks magical and possible, they stand together on the lawn where Catherine used to play as a child before the fire, and a groundskeeper offers to take their photo. This photo, unlike the formal one from the foundation dedication, is spontaneous and real. Catherine is still crying, but she's smiling through her tears. Marcus has his arm around her waist, and his shoulder still aches from the bullet wound, but he's grinning because his family is together and safe. Sophia is in front of them making a silly face because 7-year-olds don't stay serious for long. And Alexander stands beside them with his hand on Catherine's shoulder, finally looking like the grief that's consumed him for 28 years is beginning to lift. They're not perfect. They're not undamaged. But they're together, and they're choosing to build something good from the ashes of what was destroyed. Catherine narrates over this final scene, her voice reflective and grateful, and still tinged with sadness for everything that was lost but celebrating everything that was found. She says, "My mother gave me the tools to survive. She gave me evidence that kept me alive and eventually brought down the man who killed her. She gave me instructions on how to be brave when I wanted to give up. She gave me permission to choose my own life. Marcus gave me a reason to survive. He gave me love when I thought I didn't deserve it. He gave me a family when I thought I'd never have one. He gave me 7 years of peace in the middle of 28 years of fear. Sophia gave me a future worth protecting. She gave me something more important than justice or wealth or revenge. She gave me motherhood. She gave me the chance to raise a child with the love and security I lost when I was 17. And my father gave me the family I thought I'd lost forever. He gave me a second chance. He gave me resources to help people. He gave me the understanding that forgiveness is possible even after decades of pain." The final shot shows the four of them on the estate grounds with the sun setting behind them, and they're genuinely happy. Not fake social media happy, but real human happy, the kind that comes from surviving hell and choosing to build something good on the other side. The camera pulls back to show the estate, the guest house where Marcus and Catherine live, the main mansion where Alexander lives, the gardens where Sophia plays, and superimposed over the image is text that says, based on themes of survival, identity, and chosen family. The story fades to black, but before it does, there's one more image. The photograph from the beginning of the story, the one that started everything. The portrait of young Catherine that hung in Alexander's study as a memorial to his dead daughter. That portrait is being taken down carefully by staff, and in its place, they're hanging the new family photo. The memorial to the dead is being replaced by a celebration of the living. Catherine survived. Marcus protected her. Sophia gave them purpose. Alexander got his second chance. And Victoria's sacrifice finally meant something. So there you have it. A poor husband asked a simple question that led him into a billionaire's mansion, and that simple question uncovered a 28-year conspiracy that went all the way to a senator's office and corrupted an entire city's police force. Marcus Rivera took a bullet for love, literally put his body between his wife and a gun, because that's what you do when you love someone more than you love your own safety. Catherine Cross, or Elena Rivera, or whoever you want to call her, spent 20 years living in fear and poverty and hiding, protecting evidence that would bring down corrupt politicians while building a life that was real and meaningful despite being based on a false identity. Sophia got her grandfather back, got the family she never knew she had, got security and opportunity and love. And Victoria's sacrifice, her decision to document corruption, even though it cost her her life, finally meant something. Her evidence brought down Richard Hendricks. Her daughter survived. Her granddaughter is thriving. Her husband got a second chance to be a good father. That's justice. That's closure. That's as happy an ending as you can get when the story starts with murder and arson and corruption.